I'm not sure what your position is over at Aptus, so why don't you give yourself a more proper introduction?
Hello, my name's Ryan, and I'm the U.S. Director for Aptus Plant Tech.
And then, of course, everyone knows Notsodog.
Hi.
So we are live, and today we are going to talk about organic gardening versus inorganic gardening.
Oh, here comes Wolf and the
What's up, Wolf?
interference.
Let's see. Can't be changed while recording. I guess there is no way.
Wolf, you sound like you're next to a highway.
Okay. That's because I am.
He's in a helicopter.
Yeah, you're in a helicopter? Okay, I'm going to go live on Instagram just to get people to come. And by the way, Ryan, you should be able to find the link now if you go look
Yeah,
at
I just I went to the YouTube channel, and
Nice.
I'm just putting it into some group chats, get some people in
Great.
here for you.
I'm going to do a 1-minute video because that's what's required by Instagram to save it. What is up, everybody? This is Gaby, Staten Island from the Craft Growers Network, and I am excited because I got my friends here today. I don't know if you can see them. Anyway, we've got Tatu Sadhu from Kiss Organics, and we have Ryan from Aptus, and then, of course, Notsodog. Everybody's been missing Notsodog, asking every week if he's coming back, so he's finally back. And, of course, as I said before, I'm Gaby, Staten Island, and today we are doing an Ask Us Anything about organics versus salts. Now, the one thing I should say is we are really focusing on in containers. And that's something that I forgot to say on my Reddit post. Like a lot of people, were making comments about, growing in the ground, how, using salts. I think most of us can agree here that if we were growing in the ground, like if we had a piece of land and it was ours and we were going to be there for a while, that we would want to grow organically there, and we would want to like improve the soil to make it grow organic. But in a container, that's what we're going to discuss. And so if you're on Instagram and you're watching us live, or if you see this video, please check us out on the Craft Growers Network on YouTube. And yeah, because we got it going right now.
I would just like to say that I know this is like part 2. I wanted to listen to part 1 before I joined today, but my mom was having some struggles and I kind of emergency had to go back and see her and stuff. And so I did not. So if I start chatting about something that's already been covered, feel free to shut me up.
No,
We honestly pretty much just talked about Grateful Dead. So.
Oh, well,
you missed that.
I have a lot of thoughts on this subject that we're going to talk about today. And just both from like I also feel it's a little bit like feeding is a little bit like cannabis weed religion, and that people get like very into whatever method they choose.
Oh yeah.
And they'll battle it pretty hard, which I think is good.
Well, it's funny because Brandon said that it was like rage baiting people. Like,
well,
like
I think there's a lot of.
Hold on, Notsodog, because I want to get off of Instagram.
Okay, sure.
Real fast. He said it was like rage baiting people because there was like such angry comments and like people started fighting in the chat, and that was not our purpose. So anyway, I'm gonna get off of Instagram. Everybody, go check us out on YouTube right now. And like we know that it's I don't want to say controversial, but a debated subject, and people are passionate about it. But like. Because Brandon is objective and tries to, think of things in a scientific way, people actually got offended and thought like he wanted to, that he's a hydro guy, and he's the organic guy. He's the guy that teaches people how to grow organic, but he was getting some heat.
I run into a lot of the same issues. When you start to look at it scientifically, people take it like you're coming after their passion, and it's not that.
That's why I said it's a bit like arguing over religion or something like that.
Yeah,
because it's almost like dogma or doctrine, and when you challenge people on it, because I think that like life is about trade-offs, and I think there's a lot of trade-offs in organics versus salts, and people want to be like, well, the way that I've chosen is the perfect way, and it's clearly the most moral and ethical way, and you are cheating by
Right.
using X, you know?
Indoor
So that's like
gardening.
why I love science, because like science, you should take your feelies out of the conversation. And dogma is just basically like you're throwing in the towel, like you're not willing to learn anymore. And if that's
Ryan, that's so funny.
I know he's got his cat behind him going for
yeah,
it.
with the tail.
Yeah. And
It's
Yeah,
just
I mean,
Callie.
I
but so you don't want to be dogmatic. You want to be open. And I like to look at things from a database, science-based perspective. And I think I mean, I'm an organic guy through and through. I think that, we all think that the way we grow is the best way because it's like, we like to smoke our weed. It's the best weed, that kind of stuff. Like, um, but as long as it's sustainable, I've got kids, but I know that, I don't know if Ryan's got kids, but Gabby's got kids. Natso's got kids.
Yeah.
And so,
I do not.
as long as it's sustainable, you can afford to do it and it's fun, knock your socks off. I have a way that I like to do it,
Sure.
but I'm totally open to how other people want to do it. And if it's fireweed, I'm not going to turn it down.
I mean, I will say that as a weed nerd, right?
We
And
got
some
we got
and
4 weed nerds here.
and
for sure.
someone who wants better herb, like those nuances of like the things that lead to better herb and the things that don't, you know? And then obviously to like your view of science or what have you. Science, I don't want to say it was banned, but science was very difficult to achieve in cannabis for a long time. And so what we had was essentially like observational science,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know? Like we couldn't
Oh,
like, like
100%.
when Gabby first gave me the dog or the Chem 91 and it had all those like leaf issues and like weird rust on the leaves and it looked like it was dying, there wasn't a lab that we could send off for tissue analysis. Like, for the first, like up until recently, really,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
The,
know,
That's
the,
such a
the, the
valuable
hemp
tool.
bill,
I
the
can't-
hemp bill
I
opened
can't-
it up to
Yeah.
the hemp bill opened it up to universities, and that was like a godsend. My biggest fear was somebody would find my notebooks and I would be looking at 30.
And
Like
I'm-
the fact that we can talk about this is amazing to me.
and I
Huge
also
investment.
think that like science has revealed some things that I find pretty disheartening, you know, like, in just in the terms of like inputs that I use that I loved a bunch that I started to have to reassess, and things like that. But really, what I care about, okay, is I want better weed. I mean, like the sustainability issue, the regenerative issue, all those different things, like that's like those things are valuable in themselves.
Oh,
They
100%.
matter.
They are, but just because some method might be more than another,
The goal's always the best
Oh,
weed in the room.
right.
That's
yeah,
that. I mean, we
and so
should
how do
state
you?
that out front. Like
And
that's the goal.
I also think that I should mention here something that I think about a lot is when it comes to consuming flower, we're actually trying to trick the plant, right? Because what the plant wants to do is it wants to absorb a ton of nutrition to be able, when it gets pollinated, to make seed for the next generation.
Biological mission.
That's its biological mission. And what we're trying to do is trick it to grow these lovely flowers that never get seeded in most cases.
Right.
And then to have that flower express the terpenes and the THC and actually burn the way that we would choose it to. But the plant itself is not perfectly growing itself for our combustion.
No, 100%.
It's not. It wants to make seed and continue its species.
Yeah.
And
100%.
so I have like, I'll use CSI as an example, but like I have a bunch of friends that breed, and when they grow organically, the beds that they have that are for seed production have far more nitrogen and excessive, nutrition in it organically than what they would grow for flour. Because growing for flour, it's like you're trying to like give the plant just enough so it can reach its potential, but not a bunch of excess.
All right,
Yeah, you
especially
don't want to start
cannabis.
impacting your terpenes. We all know at this point, excess nitrogen, delaying senescence, diminishing terpenes, reducing harvest metric. And so like we always should, like I catch a lot of flack, a lot of pushback. People were like, oh, you always say it depends, it depends. And it always
Yeah.
does. It's very nuanced. Like, what is your end goal? Are you growing for fiber? Are you growing for flour? Are you growing for seed? Are you chopping it 2 weeks early because you're just doing fresh frozen? Like, it all matters.
Well, growing for seed, in my opinion, or growing for resin is much easier to feed than growing for flour, because the flour for the resin or the seed is just the carrier. You're not concerned. You can pump a bunch of nitrogen into it. You know,
You don't have to do the terpene dance. Exactly.
you don't have to do
Yeah.
any of that stuff because you're just extracting something and the flour is just the carrier. But if you want clean burning flour, you kind of have to, even no matter what method you're doing, you kind of have to pick and choose your spots.
Right. I mean, indoor cultivation is nothing but a trade-off of, it's a trade-off of many factors. So when you have one person who's been in a place for a good while and you found a set of circumstances that works for you, you see it like that's your reality. So it makes it difficult when people come together to discuss cultivation sometimes, especially inorganic versus organic. You have a whole bunch of truths arguing against each other, for different sets of circumstances. So
Sure.
it always provides great conversation. For
I
sure.
also think that, like, when people think organic versus chem, they're thinking some really evil chemicals being used to sort of trick the plant to being nice.
Right.
And
It's
organics
all ions.
and
All
and
uptake is
Well,
ions.
I think a
Yeah,
lot of
it's all
that. I think a lot of that comes from the early 2000s when you could go to a grocery store and buy like paclobutrazol in a bottle. You could buy like chloroquine bottle right off the shelf and have PGR cocktail. And I mean, I was managing my store when EPA came in and said, "Those, take them off now."
oh
And
yeah,
And
literally,
they were right.
yeah,
they
And they
will
were
remain
right.
they'll remain nameless, but there was multiple products on the shelves that listed only kelp as their active ingredient,
oh
and
yeah,
they just secretly
yeah.
had some paclo in there,
right.
you know.
Oh man, the stories I could tell you about people who made those products. I won't name names, but I was talking to their distributor about another product that they sold at the time, a type of planter, and he looked dead at me in my face. He's like, I asked him about that product, and he's like, "Oh hell yeah, it has PGR. So I'm gonna sell it till I get caught." And I will tell you, he hasn't gotten caught yet, and that was years ago. So you have to be so careful about some of the products
I
you use.
remember when I still worked for Gaby, and at the time at his shop, and the first product in the cannabis industry that came out that actually named what was in it was this product called Dr. Nodes. Okay. And I believe it was Sunlight sent us a sample. Okay. And the
Okay.
sample came in a shrink wrapped package. All right. And it said on the package that pregnant women weren't allowed to touch the bottle.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. At all. Like, not just use it, but touch the bottle. And it
Couldn't
just
touch
so
it.
happened that I had a pregnant coworker. So Gabby had a pregnant employee. And Gabby saw that pregnant women weren't allowed to touch the bottle. And he was like, this isn't even going to be in my store.
Yeah.
Like, this has to go. What do you
Right,
mean they
right.
can't touch the bottle? You know? Like, and
There's a
so,
difference between treating apple orchards and treating a plant that's going to be combusted, and you have those byproducts and combusted, vulcanized into your lungs. Like it's
well,
a whole different thing.
one of the things, like, just to like feed off that or whatever, a very popular fungicide in the commercial industry is Eagle 20.
Oh yeah.
And it's rated for, human use and consumption because your liver breaks it down or what have you. But when you combust it, it makes cyanide.
I didn't know Eagle 20 was designed for food.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
See, we learned something here
Eagle 20
on the Craft Growers Network.
Eagle
every
20
day.
was designed for food. It was used extensively in the food, and then your body they say your body harmlessly breaks it down. Okay. And so it was registered for that. But then they discovered that when you combusted it, it created cyanide as a byproduct. Well, obviously, inhaling cyanide is a no-no.
Yeah, not
You
so
know,
good.
not so good. You know,
Yeah. We're
I
very
mean,
limited in the cannabis world, the toolbox that we can, forget legal, let's talk ethical, like that we can ethically use. Um, there's tons of systemics that are, if used in the right place and right, environment are safe,
Oh my
depending on
gosh,
what the.
bro. You are setting yourself up for so much hate right now.
well, I mean, the
I
thing
can't
about
even,
Let me just
I
say
can't
that. Can
even
I just
believe
say
he's
this real
going here.
quickly though?
After
Like,
last week, I thought like he's gonna be like super
yeah, no,
cautious.
I take all fades, man. I don't care. I've been, I've probably been growing longer than the people who are saying stuff to me have been alive. So it's all good. And I just want to say that I've grown in all the ways. Deep water, rock wool. I was a salt grower for 20 years. I've got another 20 years of organic growing. It's what fulfills me mentally. I get the flower, as far as like the flower I want, it's a process that works for me. If somebody else wants to do it some other way, knock yourself out. Like I'm not here to argue with anybody. I'm here to just help growers because I think a lot of the complaints about organics is I do think that organics is harder. I think that your timing has to just be just down. You have to be much more proactive, less reactive. Um, it's wonderful to have a bottle with a, known NPK and no middlemen, no microbes.
I mean,
That's.
I should
But I was
also
just going to say, like, everybody has their own way of doing it. I have a preferred way, but I'm not knocking anybody else's way.
Hey, before
I
we go any further,
hmm,
I just want to give you guys like a little format of what I want to do today because it's going to be a
sure.
little bit different than normal. So what we want to do today is I have like a ton of questions that people posted on Reddit, okay, as well as on Instagram. We're going to focus first on the questions on Reddit because we invited people to ask questions there. But so what I want to do first is I want to give everybody just a couple of minutes to give their stance. And so Notsodog, if you want to go first,
Oh
you
my
could just,
God.
but we're going to give you like less than 10 minutes and just make it brief.
Okay.
And because then we're going to answer everyone's questions and all this stuff is going to come up anyway. But so I'll let you go, Notsodog, first because I know you can
Yeah.
talk.
I think, in a nutshell, that there are many paths to growing excellent cannabis, and that you can definitely grow excellent cannabis with salts, right? I think that it's a little harder to do with organics. I think organics has a higher ceiling in that some of the favorite herb I've ever smoked has been organic, but I also think it's a lower floor. And people that think that if they just grow organically, that they're clearly doing a better job and producing better cannabis than anyone that's growing salt is mistaking themselves. I also think that in general, whether it's organic or salt, that lightly fed canna probably has a better chance of being the type of herb that you want to smoke than when you're pushing it, right? Or trying to you're trying to maximize your flower formation or you're trying to maximize whatever. Um, and I think that people get caught up a lot in labels. I also think that because organic is a state or a federal or a political word, you know, that people have a lot of misconceptions over the term organic.
Right.
Like if you eat, for instance, if I go to the store and I buy organic food, it has to be grown. It has to like the vegetable has to have been grown like by the organic rules, right? But if I get bone meal, that's organic by law. It does not have to come from an organic cow. It's organic by definition. So it could be a McDonald's burger cow from a feedlot, fed all kinds of stuff. And
Or
so,
maybe even a clearer example is you can have organic compost that's made with plant matter that was sprayed with Roundup or anything. You know,
So yeah, so I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds of it, but I would just like to say that there is a path to growing excellent quality cannabis for almost anyone, right? But there are some rules where it's like you can go off the rails with organic and produce some pretty bad flower, and you can do the same thing with salt, and that's where the nuance and that's where the battling comes in. And Tatsu mentioned ethically stuff. There's a big debate in organics, even amongst different stuff that's fully organic, on what's ethical. Some products are nicer than others. I could be 100% organic and grow only with stuff that was a byproduct from the meatpacking industry.
Yep.
And there might be some hippie growers out there that didn't think that was too kosher.
Well, it's funny that you say that because Tad, the owner of Kiss Organics, I don't know if it was recently or it just showed up on my feed where he was talking about that because he was having a debate with the guy from Build a Soil who thinks that all that stuff is bad, and Tad thinks that like it should be used because it's good fertilizer, and because if not, what's going to happen with that material?
Well,
It's going to go into a landfill. I would rather, I grew up on a farm and like, let not so talk. My bad.
I just mean that like bone meal, America has such a love affair with beef that bone meal and blood meal is pretty sustainable because they're byproducts of the meatpacking industry. And so you're not like where, like, I love guano, okay? But guano generally means you're destroying habitat, whether that's in caves or whether that's seabird or what have you. So my opinion is, generally speaking, almost any method you pick is going to have some trade-offs. And it would behoove everyone to accept that there are some trade-offs with their method. And I have yet to see a method that is pure and has very little. I guess if you grew your own organic farm and you took biomass from that and made your own compost, but most people don't do that kind of stuff. I don't have any issue with bottles. Because let's be fair too. Not everyone has a farm. And somebody who's living in an apartment in New York or Boston or something should have an opportunity to try to grow quality cannabis too. And they might not be able to have 5-gallon buckets of rotting fish heads with sugar and do KNF. They might not be able to have a compost pile that they can turn. They might have a tent in a side bedroom. And there should be a path for them to grow good cannabis too. And so I think people get hooked up on like trying to make sure, I can talk a bunch, I'll shut up. But
we'll talk more in a minute.
But I'll shut up and I'll let other people talk, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'll give you a couple minutes too before we start answering questions.
Okay, so I would agree with all of that. Yeah, 100%. I agree with all of that. I'm not dogmatic. People that know me know that I'm a very passionate organic grower, and we can get into all the reasons as to why. But I've also done tons of salt growing, and I want the best weed. I'm a deadhead, man. Like I want the best weed. That's what I'm here for. I want to be I want to be like, the goal was always to be like, if you were at a show, if you could smell something better than yours, you needed to go home and step your game up, And so like, I've been smoking since I was 4 years old, which is not something I would endorse. I don't think that was like productive parenting necessarily on my, but my parents were children when I have a twin brother, and we grew up, with parents that, took LSD and smoked pot, and, they were heads. I agree with everything that Francis said. Like, if it's going to give you the best weed, do it. I do care very much. Part of my goal, top flower, is I do want sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I just want it to be not negatively impacting the environment to the, and that includes carbon footprint. There's people that want to fight cocoa versus peat carbon footprints, and there's all these. I understand evolutionarily as humans, we want to be in tribes. We want to be in little cults. We want to be in little teams. You know, short boarders hate long boarders out in the lineup. Salt guys and organic guys fight. Fish heads and dead heads. Like, it's, you know, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all, you know, we're evolutionarily driven to look for differences, which, you know, which is, it makes sense. If I'm out solo and I bump into another tribe in the woods, and I could be in trouble, you know. But in this day and age, when I go to the mall and I see people that look differently from me, that shouldn't set off my evolutionary bells, you know. And so this need to be in these groups, the most negative thing about them, like, it's kind of cool in terms of, like, somebody will take a really deep dive into one area and really get to know that. Specialization, I think, is interesting and beneficial. But as far as accepting it as a dogma, this is the only way to do it. The way I'm doing it's right, you know, which infers the way you're doing it's wrong. Like, that's counterproductive. And as somebody that spent 4 decades growing pirate style and looking over my shoulder, and I'll die here in helicopters 45 minutes before anybody else does, um, fighting about it is the silliest thing we could be doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just damn
Discussing
ridiculous.
it is okay, but like being dogmatic
Debating
about
it,
and not
debating it from a science-based, like, not your feelies, you know, because I feel like to some extent that's kind of become the mantra.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified, but, and it's like, okay, well, do the research, do the study, you know.
I mean, even that, even beyond I think there's a practicality component that's very important. You know, there's some things that don't scale, right? Like, even when I
Yep.
first moved to California and I was doing gorilla, we avoided a whole set of like fish products because we couldn't afford to like attract bear to
Yeah.
the patch.
Dig
You
up
know,
everything, looking
like,
for
you
it.
know, you've got like a deer fence or something in the bushes around your little plot or whatever, but like if you use some fish emulsion or you did them this or that and you get a 400-pound bear that like thinks that there's food in there, he's probably going to mess up your stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like a practicality, like I was saying about like you can't do KNF in your apartment. Like, there's a practicality component of like it needs to work. Like, you should be able to try to grow the best quality you can within your limitations.
Sure. Can you
Yeah,
imagine
yeah.
knocking over a bucket of FAA inside an apartment? Oh my.
No, you'd be doomed.
Not unless you were doing it on purpose.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
You'd
terrible.
be doomed.
Yeah.
You'd be doomed, dude, or some Jadam, or oh my
That's a
god, it
smell
would be
that'll
just the
kick
most.
you in the back of the throat. Right
When
We did a conference this past year out in Montana, and it was all organic focused because that's what our company does. But there was some KNF farms that they did everything with KNF, and it was really nice because they had a very open, honest conversation about it's not practical, especially at scale. It's not, you know, it'd be one thing to maybe go
No.
spray these
KNF
ferments
takes work at
or
scale.
whatever over a large area. But as far as dialed in, you know, this is a farm that has to have a ROI. It's got investors. You have to produce, and for them to do dialed in targeted fertility, how are you going to do that? Because your inputs are never going to be the same exactly. You know, you can get close, but so like, if I was on a desert island, I'd be KNF all day long. But it was nice for them. They were real honest about how difficult that is. So I'm not saying it's not doable, but it's just difficult.
I can tell you from my perspective that when cannabis went legal, and then after that, when they started doing heavy metal testing, it broke my heart because all of a sudden, like some of my favorite products, basically everything from the ocean, all this compost started failing.
Mineable stuff, ocean, yeah,
it all started
That's the
failing
elephant in the room.
And
as
then
somebody who like
Hudson got so
that's the elephant in the room with organic growers is heavy metals.
and because cannabis is a heavy metal accumulator, You know, you start testing stuff and you're like, oh, this compost failed, this compost failed, all this stuff from the ocean fail, 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 fail,
Yeah,
fail.
fail.
And you're like, oh, I'm growing in the most sustainable organic way. And you're like, yeah, but you've got nickel, cadmium, lead, da 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 da,
There's
unacceptable
levels to
levels.
everything. There's
Yeah.
levels to everything, and so like you have this best intention and you're doing this thing, but so the challenge that I take up is like, okay, so there's heavy metals. So I find the things that are safe to use. I find there's no silver bullet. So like you manage your pH, you do silica, you make sure there's available phosphorus, you do all those things that prevent, like if you've got a pH of 5.5, you've literally just set up an arsenic pump for your plant with organics, and so um, there's a way to do in the toughest states. There's a way to grow organically on scale and pass. But it requires, having that education of what you're talking about, of knowing
I mean,
all these things. Like we can't rest on our laurels. We always have to be learning. We always have to be pushing the conversation forward.
correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Build a Soil or Kiss or both of them or whoever, didn't they come out with like a commercial blend that they did that was lower in heavy metals? Because
We
when heavy metals first started getting tested, they realized that some inputs were problematic, even though they were organic and all that, and they had to shift, in order to pass
It
testing
wasn't.
and stuff.
Yeah. I won't get into that ant's nest just because of where I work and everything. But it wasn't
Sure.
us, and it wasn't us. So let's
Okay.
leave it at that.
I'm not
But
trying to, I
yeah.
wasn't.
But people are learning. I was at Soil Summit, Steve Cantwell's thing, and there was a well-known organic, I don't know, influencer consultant with a product that they were like super excited about. They had an organic product with no heavy metals, and that should raise every eyebrow in the room, and Tad, who Gabby knows, has got a really good moral compass, and he went over and said, hey, I think I know where you got that test done, and it's a lab, and it's a really cool lab, but the lab uses equipment so that like the four of us could jump in a golf cart and go ride around a Superfund site and point this little meter at things, and we could be like, okay, Gabby, write it down. We've got to do something about that hill over there. That low-lying area is fine. And so the level of detection is really high. And so he was getting non-detected, but he could have had 300 parts per million arsenic in that product, And so got it tested again, and of course, because it's organic, there is heavy metals in it. But you
Sure.
want to stay away from the ocean products. You want to stay away from the mineable products. Um, and then a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, we didn't have we didn't have heavy metal numbers for baby food, and so cannabis that a home grower is growing using azomite, kelp, all these things that are like death blows in the organic legal cannabis market. Somebody growing at home in a tent, that's still going to be safer or safe as anything you're going to get in the standard grocery store, as far as heavy metals are concerned. And so, again, it depends on, you got to, the first rule of agronomy, the right plant in the right place, and that applies to all the methodologies. And so, what a home grower wants and needs versus scalable is totally
Sure.
different. And,
Very different. My
Okay, hey,
thoughts so
Tattoo.
far.
Wait, 1 second, Notsodog. I want to let Ryan
That's what I was gonna
say
say.
his, and then also he was
Yeah.
shaking his head a little bit about the ocean products. So, but so what I want to do is just another couple minutes in, let's answer some of these questions.
Sure.
And then if we get through some, because I'm worried that Brandon's going to have to leave.
Okay.
So if
I
Brandon
got
can-
permission. I can stay.
All right. Well,
Ryan,
let's ramble.
speak
I got
up.
permission.
Go ahead, Ryan. It's on you.
All right, so I do apologize. When we first started this, I didn't hear the topic. You wanted us to each speak on individually for a couple of minutes.
Oh, just your thoughts about growing organic in containers versus salts, and
Okay.
what your general feelings about organic versus inorganic gardening all around.
Sure. So I want to first say thanks to everyone who's usually on Mr. Spliff's lives. You can always catch me there. I do a lot of Q&A. So I'm like split right down the middle almost. I'm an environmental scientist by degree and trade. My my first love of growing was hydroponics. So I think I've really been, and I own a small organic ocean-based product called Mineralize. Um, and I sell inorganic products with Aptus. So feel like I always end up in a lot of these organic versus inorganic type scenarios. As Notsodog said, I really do believe the same that both organic and inorganic cultivation can both be dirtier and cleaner than each other, depending on the setup and the setting. Um, I think there's a lot of misconstrued realities about the quote unquote dirtiness of what people call chemical inputs that are a salt based input, which is just a combination of anion and cations products where you have positive and negative, and together it forms one compound that goes into concentration in a fertilizer. The process that we use to make a lot of these comes from natural gas. We take natural gas and we concentrate it at high temperatures and high pressures, and that's where we make ammonia. The nitrogen and all these evil nitrogen compounds people talk about comes from the atmosphere. And so when you do that, you actually will combine it with different byproducts of when they're doing mines, and you'll bring these elements in and create these compounds. And you have the benefit of when you're a fertilizer company like with Aptus, I will tell you that like CDFA, man, they love testing my stuff and making sure it's okay to the ppm on a regular basis. Every 6 months, I'll have an email from them. Hey, we tested your stuff. Here's what we found, within range. So, um, but organics, I think with pots and the containers, you're trying to bring something that has a huge footprint in its natural form, right? You have a massive gradient of soil where water moves, and you have microbe life and terrestrial life that moves through the soil and aerates it and digests things and leaves byproducts, which becomes food. You have a huge lung of just the atmosphere of, bacteria, pulling atmospheric nitrogen into the soil and sunlight and the heat input. And to take all of that down and condense it into a 5-gallon planter that you just want to add water to inside, you know, when you try to bring down concentrations of food, it's real easy to have some undesirable concentrations if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely kind of mirror Notsodog in that, both methods of growing are entirely acceptable. It's doing your best within your ability with the inputs that you have to have the cleanest result. And I've seen some spectacular hydroponic grows that have really incorporated some things in there. And I've seen some spectacular organic grows of just add water soils where they have really just gone into the science and the testing and gone through years of effort to, grow some beautiful plants. So, I think, we can definitely have a talk that both are completely adequate for, cannabis cultivation, and not either one's not to be demonized.
One thing I wanted to quickly mention that I was thinking of before you do the questions things, Gabby, is I want people to realize that when it comes to, like, let's just call it hydroponic salts in the cannabis industry, these things that are designed to be able to go through deep water culture or NFT or even just like, a tank and a hose or whatever. A lot of times people compare that to like organic versus chemical in food, where like in food production, if it has an N value, you could use sludge, you can use all kinds of different kinds of waste. As long as it has a value, it can be considered a fertilizer.
Yeah.
And so there can be all kinds of impurities in these things. And the stuff that we use, even like the Demon General Hydroponics or whatever, like that stuff is clean enough to go through sprayers. It's so much cleaner than a lot of the commercial garbage that might have gotten used that got the bad name in fields, and people don't, I think, realize that because they honestly compare food to cannabis production when the salts that we're using in cannabis production are already way more refined and way purer than what you would get in a lot of like, poor commercial grows of food.
100%. And the
And people don't
process,
see that.
I'm
and
not
the
making any declarative statements that like all ocean is bad, all minable's bad, all salts are bad. I'm also not saying that all organics are safe or that all organics are good. I've got some pretty strong thoughts on, the animal byproduct products, as somebody that grew up on a farm. you know um, my twin brother's a vegan. He doesn't want to use any of that, and we both had to kill animals as little kids, and that scars you as a little kid. It made him not want to do anything with that. Me, I don't want it going into a landfill. I feel like if you're going to kill a buffalo, you have to use the whole buffalo. And so, like, I'm
That's what
not,
farmers. That's what a responsible farmer does, is not
yeah.
waste.
But so,
Uh,
like, in whether it's salt, whether it's organic, whatever, um, whether you're a food grower, you just need to arm yourself with the education, the economics of the process you want to pursue. And as long as you're armed with the
sure.
education and the information that you need to make educated decisions on what is fiscally responsible and what's, safe for everybody, then, proceed.
Right. And it's real interesting if when you talk, just drawing like the parallel of seawater, it's easy to, I think, separate like heavy metals from, like, say you bring a ocean-based input, but what's remarkably similar is blood, and thus blood meal. You
Hmm.
get a similar concentration of similar heavy metals in it, and it's not as much of a sigma in some organic circles as ocean input. So it's all of it runs a lot of parallel, but yeah, this is enjoyable. I love talking about this
I'm
stuff.
Yeah,
gonna say
yeah,
something
and
real fast.
each
Man,
each separate input, you know, you can get on the California registry, and
Oh,
I'm not a
hold
fan
on.
of
I have a request for my
self-reporting.
hat. I have a request for my hat from Spliff's group. I will wear the
huh,
hat.
all right.
Nice.
There you
Well,
go,
But you
one,
guys.
but you can look
There
at
you go. We
different,
got the hat.
different blood meals, different bone meals, different, there's not just one producer. There might only be five, but you can go through and look and see which ones are the safest for you,
100,
you
yeah,
know.
absolutely, 100%. And that's probably one of the largest sins of the organic supply chain at large, is that it's so easy for a company to buy like a primo piece of like alfalfa meal, chop it up, send it for testing, that's been grown, with sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows. And then they put that label on all their product, and immediately they go to the, you know, like Saudi subsidized fields in Arizona, be like, we want your alfalfa, and they slap the label on it. It requires a huge amount of vigilance if you want to grow organic responsibly, to talk to your suppliers, to ask for updated lab tests. And it's something that I deal with Aptus, because we have cattle-based inputs, collagen, like hydrolysates made from collagen in several of our products, and it requires huge vigilance on my part. Every
I I
three, every 3 months, I'm demanding fully updated lab tests, vet certificates, process diagrams, QC reports, from the critical extraction facility, all of it, and it's
yeah.
it's a huge thing.
We visit places too. My boss has got a really good moral compass, takes it to heart, takes the responsibility seriously.
Sure,
And so we test all of our inputs, all of our outputs regularly.
nice.
We post them online. We want it to be,
And see,
Transparent.
that's so rare for an
transparent.
organic-based company these days. So many of
I'm
them will go for the like primo inputs for their testing, and then they do the switch and pull, into a production cycle to, send the profit
Yeah.
upwards. And so it's nice to hear that there's companies like yours that are doing the right thing.
I'm
The
just
one thing
lucky
I
to
want to
look
say,
work for a guy
one thing I want,
that does it.
one thing I want to say is, I wanted to invite him to join the show today, and I mean, I kind of wish he did now that we didn't have Wolf, but I'm like, damn, we're gonna have like 6 people on the show, and it's gonna be a lot. But I definitely want to have him on the show. I want to talk to him because I haven't sat down and talked to him for a while. When I owned a grow shop in California, where me and Notsodog were there together, that's where I met him, and I've talked extensively with him about organic gardening. And so, but
And
anyway, not so dog. I
working
still want to
there,
talk, but I'm gonna make you stop for 1 second because I want to quickly say what I wanted to say about my thoughts about organic versus mineral gardening, and then I really do want to answer these questions because
Yeah,
we
let's
always
get
mean
some questions.
we always mean to answer the chat in these questions, and then we never do. And I feel
okay,
like in
sure.
the chat, we'll just once we start the chat, we'll say all this stuff anyway, right?
Okay, go for it.
So I've said this before, probably many times, but I used to be what I consider myself an organic snob.
I agree.
Okay, and Tatu Sadhu said, that he wasn't, that he would like, smoke that hydro if it was really good. But me, like, if it looked insane and it was hydro, I thought of that as something that would make me ill.
Gaby wouldn't even call the chem dog because he grew it organic.
Right.
So we just shortened it to dog because he's like, I'm not going to call my organic weed chem. Like that's the level of snob. He was like, the
Yeah.
name,
Yeah.
I won't even. No,
I wouldn't even call it that.
Yeah, and
called the
so,
dog.
but what I realized is now I'm just not having an open mind, and now I think of it as like I had this arrogance thinking that I could do it organically and have it come out, as good as when I'm giving the plants the salts, which has everything that the plant needs. And I wasn't even open to the discussion or to have my mind, like, to just talk about it. It was like a hard no. And when I look at these chats and these questions on Reddit mostly, it's just like that. It's a very polarizing thing. People are either going to be like, it has to be 100% organic or the shit's poison, or they're going to be like, if you think you could do this with organics and not salts, you're kidding yourself. And
Well, even within organics, there's so many, it's so polarizing. There's KNF and Soil Food Web and all these different, and there's like, guys over here that think if you're not growing with your own poop, you're a heretic. And like, there's so many different ways. And
There's no making
I'm just
everyone
blown
happy.
away that we can do it and we can talk about it and we can actually study it. We have data, because I do think that organics a few years ago was, unless you were a really experienced, good great grower, it was hard because we didn't have targets. We didn't have metrics. That once that changed, that once we could test things in a university lab, that all changed. But I've really enjoyed weed that I've grown in salts, and I've really enjoyed weed I've grown in organics. I prefer organic, but I'm not a snob about it. I like the challenge,
Yeah.
honestly.
Let's get to
I like the
questions,
challenge.
Gaby.
I just want to finish what I had to say because I'm almost done with it. Or not, maybe not, but I still have more that I want to say. So I used to grow exclusively organic. And then when I went to those red, green, and blood-colored bottles, I did better. And when I was growing organic, I was really trying. Like I did some crazy shit. Maybe it wasn't good. We can laugh about the stuff that I did now, but like, so I used to make my soil and I would amend it, I think, with guanos and oyster shell, and then I would have guano tea. And so I would have like a 30-gallon trash can, and it would be I would never let it get more than half empty. And when it gets half empty, I would add more to it. Because I was thinking like, it's like a sourdough starter. I always want to keep this culture going, right? Dude, I did the same thing with my vegetable scraps. Can you imagine how disgusting vegetable scrap tea was? And I was just trying to do everything that and of course
The
seaweed.
ferment.
Yeah, I was trying to do everything that I could to grab nutrients from organic methods that I could liquefy and give to my plants and make them available. It actually worked, but not perfectly. And the Chem 91 was the perfect example because it wasn't having that shit. Okay, like it wanted more and it was so unhappy. And when I fed it the hydroponic nutrient, the plant just grew better. And not only the yield, everyone's like, oh yeah, well, if you want yield, you grow hydro. Say hi. If you want yield, you grow hydro, but if you want quality, you grow organic. No, I
Neither's
don't.
mutually exclusive.
Yeah,
Neither's
I-
mutually exclusive.
and so what I want to say is, let's just be open to learning. You know, like maybe whether we continue to do it organic or like, so if you're organic, maybe you'll learn how to do things better organic, you know, to give you a better crop. If you're growing hydro, you know, maybe you'll add some organics to it that could add some things that benefit the plant. I mean, Ryan was saying that Aptus sells plants that have organic additives in them or have organic products in it. There's a reason for it. Okay. You know, and I think that when you have, this is the last sentence, so we'll answer some questions. I think that when you give the plant everything it needs in a mineral form, like a hydroponic nutrient, and then you give it some organics to that, now you're giving the plant everything it needs, everything that we know it needs, and then maybe some things that it appreciates.
Yep.
And that's how I think you get the best quality product. You know, so
Not to plug them on purpose. I'm not
go
affiliated
ahead.
with them, but there's a Azomite. The people from Azomite, they actually got into, I can't remember the journal's name, but I'd read it. It's a pretty prestigious journal. But they actually showed that the presence of a broad spectrum of trace minerals actually, they actually saw the different genes turn on in the plant, and they did like a subsequent grow and cuttings and everything else, and you know, that was a really interesting study that I personally read that kind of leans into the quality ethos of organics, or mythos, I should say, why organics tends to have that banner of quality about it. Because if you do it properly, you know, versus a straight, you know, 13 mineral like hydro style grow, you do see enzymatic pathways that are activated. You do see different genes and leaf sets and colorations and ranges of terpenes that differ strongly. So there's definitely a lot of things, and that's my background is broad spectrum trace mineral supplementation. I've done a bunch of research and product development with it, and it definitely makes a difference, 100%. And you
And
get those organics.
there's
got-
always
And
cofactors and covariables to keep in mind. So like maybe it's a chitinase response, maybe
Yep.
it's a trace element response, you know, and so
Yep.
that's where the science is important, because
Sure.
data collection and being able to look at all these different things. Maybe it was all these things, like when we talk about praying plants, there's like a dozen things that affect leaf angle. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, and so that's why data collection is so important to me.
and one of the things that can be really frustrating is you could have an organic mix that is ideally suited for X strain, and then you put
Yeah.
a different strain in there, and it's too much or too little of one element, and the plant isn't as happy as the other plant, because cannabis is a family of things, and it's not like they all absorb the same amounts, you know. So it's
100%.
like it's not like a one size fits all, which can be quite frustrating. You know, sometimes I'm even like living soil guys will admit to me, some strains I grow in my living soil, I feel like I hit it out of the park. Other plants I put in that same soil, it feels like they struggle a bit and they're a little less happy than this other one. And so that can be a variable as well.
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, we're in dangerous danger of keep going on this. We should probably answer some
Yeah.
questions.
Answer some questions.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
It's a
like,
volatile
it's
topic.
funny
But
because
with any form of growing though, you get your guardrails and you tighten it up with your cultivar, and I, you know.
Oh yeah.
alrighty, let's answer some questions.
Sure, shoot.
So these questions that I'm reading now came from the cannabis cultivation subreddit. I think
Okay.
that's how you call it. And this question's from Silly Boys. It says, and it's a question and a comment, kind of long, but I thought it was good. This is also subjective. First, you have to ask, what's your own goals for growing? Cleanliness, highest yield, THC, terp testing, how easy it to set up and run, How much resources does it take? What are our own ideological stances? What previous knowledge, influence, and skills are we bringing? Then you have to define what term organic means to each person. Are we talking about common sense organic, like using naturally derived materials, like how K&F uses natural materials, but we can end up creating really caustic compounds that are not allowed in certified organic growing? Okay, or are we talking about OMRI listed inputs? If so, we follow only listed applications. Potassium silicate comes to mind, allowed for certain applications, but not intended for drenches in organic growing. Are we talking certified organic guidelines? This can get into complicated really fast and tie your hands for no reason, but it's also clear cut. You're either doing it all or you're not. Not to mention whether you have access to and how much space you have. Anyway, that's all to say. There's a lot of ways to do this, and you should ask yourself lots of questions and let yourself change your mind as you grow and learn. And then he went on to say nice things about me, which I won't say. But I loved what he said because basically that's what I said before. You have to allow yourself to like think and be open to like what the possibilities are, or else, if you're tying your hands behind your back, you're, you have less of a chance to reach that goal. So I loved what he had to say. It wasn't so much of a question that we could answer, I don't think. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, it's
because that's for each individual grow.
Well, it just shows all the pitfalls of how you weigh the different questions. What's organic? What's sustainable? What's this? What's that? And like those things that I mentioned, I haven't even mentioned like what leads to better weed. So there's all different angles you can come at it, and people tend to argue about them a lot, and then when they start to lose ground on one of them, they'll just switch it into something, and I personally, I like smoking good weed, and I like smoking good weed that burns well. And so if you manage to do that, like, I think you did a good job, and I've smoked lots of organic weed that I didn't think burned very well, sadly.
no,
And
no,
yeah,
I mean,
kind of keep
and
I've
but
seen a lot of living soil gardens that I couldn't believe these guys were still in business.
I mean, I think living soil is like because it's not it's got a very loose definition. It's, um there's a lot of types of it,
yep.
for
So for
lack of
me,
a
I'm
better.
growing for the tastiest herb I can get. And when we talk about smokability, um, like the white ash thing, like
Ugh.
one, just on a surface level, like really kicking an ant's nest. I've never once looked in the toilet to decide if I liked my meal. So like on the surface, it's just like the silliest thing ever to me. Two, I got so tired of people asking me about it that I reached out to a pyrologist, somebody that went to school for an extra 6 years to burn shit. And first of all, they laughed so hard for like 5 minutes that they couldn't even talk to me. And then they said, okay, for hundreds of years, your local fire department, the forestry department, tobacco. I know the white papers that these people are quoting. They're talking about adding accelerants. Do you want to add accelerants to your cannabis? And he's like, white ash comes down to, everything except for carbon burns white if it burns completely. And he's like, so it's got more to do with your cure than any elemental, content. And so he's like, then you go reach out to tobacco because puff volume versus the resin content versus the moisture content and all these things. And so like, what is the goal? And so like, I'll fully acknowledge if you can get more for your pack because it burns white, do it because you've added value. And so we really need to really dial in exactly what we value. Me as a home grower, I could care less about the color of my ash. I want the terpiest, loudest, most flavorful herb. And I'll admit that I smoke, a lot. And so, Gabby says he abuses cannabis. I do the same. I do the best that I can. And so I have a high tolerance. And so I really just want the best tasting weed. And so like
Man,
we really got to have that conversation. And then like, quantity versus quality when we go to scale. there's a tipping point. There's a diminishing return on every value point.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think anything the commercial markets taught us is that I think before everything was commercialized as it is now, I think pretty much everybody in the industry, maybe my age back, backwards, thought that everyone would hold the line a lot more. But I mean, I know people who grow fantastic flower by any metric you could put it up against, and all the people that bought from them, they're happy to go buy worse stuff from the store for the experience, and they toss it right out the window.
Well, two things. One, I think that if I thought that organics versus salts was going to be a hornet nest. The white ash thing is like the current hornet nest,
Oh yeah, no,
and
it's
I
The
agree with.
mothership.
Yeah,
well,
it's
it's something
really difficult.
visual, right? It's something that you can see. It's something
It's
that you put
really
on the
difficult, right?
ground. It becomes a hallmark of your product. It's marketing, and as
Yeah, it's
cannabis
marketing,
as cannabis
and
goes forward, it is a crop. We need to start
so
thinking of it as a crop, and playing the game that Ag's played forever.
so
It's
this will probably break Tatsu's heart, but I have a buddy that entered his herb into the proper doinks competition. Okay. And out of all the entries, him and one other person were the only two organic entries because people have found that if they do a specific perlite cocoa salt mix, it's a lot easier for them to get a pure white ash.
Yeah.
And they also dry it excessively right before the competition to make sure that the temperature point gets hotter faster and that it burns whiter. And so,
And
to
that's the
your point,
crucial aspect.
I've never smoked with friends in my entire life. They definitely have been upset if like the joint wouldn't stay lit or if it
Right.
felt harsh or there was
That's
some other
different.
issues.
100%.
But I've
That's
never
wonderful.
looked at a perfectly smoking joint that I thought tasted amazing and burned well and been like, man, everything's perfect, but this salt and pepper ash
yeah,
is
Right.
kind of
Ruining it for
disqualifying.
me.
Like, so it's
right.
almost like a new thing that people have determined. And so I was arguing with someone a number of weeks ago, and I sent them about this very subject, and I sent them this thing on Marlboro from the 70s and how pure and white the ash was an indicator of how clean and how quality it was.
It's a
Meanwhile, they're
tobacco
putting
marketing ploy.
meanwhile they're putting gunpowder like, so if you smoke, for instance,
Accelerants.
if you smoke an American Spirit, which is pure tobacco and doesn't have any of that stuff in it, it might go out if you don't keep smoking it. If you light a Marlboro Light, that thing is going to burn white ash down to the end. And so I think that there's like all these like, when things become popular or not, and then a little bit about it, you can get kind of
Well,
frustrated on it. Like, the other point I wanted to make just really quick is that the other thing I see in modern times is that there seems to be a tipping point in which, like, you start going for more yield and it seems like your quality goes down a bit,
It does.
right? Because I and I don't want people to get insulted, but I'm going to say it anyway. I sort of view legal indoor, like this getting like 3+ pounds of light, as I call it American beasters, right?
right.
Because
Bud Light.
if it was better, then no one would home grow. Like, people have more data points, people have more control over their rooms, people have computer programs where they can run everything and they can micromanage. They're feeding 3.65 EC and they're doing these little tiny bursts of feedings 14 times a day and they're doing all this different stuff. And I think whether
Sure.
you're growing organically or salt based, there's something to be said for, it seems like it's true that lightly fed cannabis that's not pushed too hard seems to exhibit the type of qualities that connoisseurs enjoy to smoke.
Sure.
But you can't tell a facility your weed would be way better if you had only got 1.3 pounds of light
Right.
versus the 3.4 that you're getting, because the math for them doesn't math,
No.
you know?
Well, and that could be one of the reasons early on that people were like organics better is because they were feeding less. They had less availability. And then one caveat that I'll definitely yield to on the white ash in organics, if because we're recycling our soil, we tend to accumulate sodium and chlorides, right? That's one of the
Mm-hmm.
issues in management. um, when I talked to the pyrologist, I went through everything top to bottom. My one chance to ask this guy every question, and I went through everything, and I went through the bad actors with it, and he's like, okay, well, you got me there. He's like, chlorides won't fully combust. He's like, so if you happen to be an organic grower and you're accumulating a lot of chlorides, he's like, you could be setting yourself up for salt and pepper ash, regardless of your cure. And so, like, there's always another level, and there's always, and that's the cool thing. Again, like we were talking about, I mentioned speciality at the beginning. Like specializing gives us that information that us as generalist cannabis growers would never know. So I'm grateful to those people that go down those wormholes as a profession or a hobby or a passion.
Shoot another question, Gabby. I'm
Alrighty.
gonna poke him.
From Auto Grower 420 says, why do organic growers hate on salt so much?
I think.
When so, I'll read the rest of it, but it's
Okay,
just
sorry,
like
that was the question.
no, it could have been essentially, but he's got some comment here. It's maybe a 30-second read. So, but since he asked, I'd like to thank everyone for asking the questions, and we'll try to do a better job of answering it instead of rambling. But that's what we're comfortable doing, is the rambling part. So he says, why do organic growers hate on salt so much when salt can produce a cleaner, more controllable product that passes lab testing much easier and has no noticeable difference in terps or trichomes and almost always out-yields organic? And if we're so concerned with organics being more environmentally friendly, please explain to me how shipping large amounts of manure, scraping the ocean for kelp, using animal byproducts, often fed from feedlots, or not so nice livestock practices that weigh 1,000 times more, cost more to ship around, more diesel, is normally in plastic packaging anyway, is better. I can get the same big thing out of a couple of teaspoons of salt that is in a large bag of organic fertilizer, and doesn't create near as many greenhouse gases or burn near the amount of diesel to get it shipped to me. The plants don't care where the nutrient comes from as long as they get them, and there's literally zero scientific evidence to suggest otherwise. Some things are better in organic form, especially if they are plant derived from responsible horticultural practices, and some things are much better, cleaner, and more environmentally friendly in salt form.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's a loaded question, and I think the answer to it kind of exposes a problem with our current method of agriculture, and that right now cultivation in the United States, for example, I know we've got some Aussies in here and some European folks, but in the United States, cultivation is so focused, say, in like the coast of the like on the west coast for climate, it's heavily irrigated. In the Midwest, heavily farmed for corn, soy, commercial crops, wheat, and and kind of the basket here in the southeast, we've got onions and pecans, peaches, apples, things of that nature. He's right in that for you to get an organic product that is clean and suitable, you have a massive spider of a supply network to come together to bring those things into something you can hold in your hand, because agriculture is so centralized that our practices need to decentralize to basically make that. So we need to I would say, more adequately use our waste materials and manufacture additives all over the place, and so that we can utilize those and reduce the carbon footprint, because he's exactly right that there is a true carbon footprint to organic production and inorganic production. But the hate, I think, comes from originally, by the definition the Rodale Institute set for organic production, was to be grown without herbicide and fungicide. That was herbicide, fungicide, insecticide. That was like the original definition, to be grown without sides. And now we have the Omri book. Geez, depending on your amendment, there's different grades. For USDA, there's different levels of certification. I mean, it's so political that it's so easy to snake your way in to get a various grade and be stamped organic. but I think the hatred stems from, like we touched on this earlier, of where PGRs used to be laden in so many products in our industry, and when it came around and was brought to the sun, everyone was like, "This is bad. We're smoking this. This was supposed to be medicine. We trusted these companies to put products to grow our medicine, which at the time, it was a real damn risk to grow it, And so to have companies that said, like you said, Gabby said was kelp, and I was like, oh, actually, that's Paclo, and so it's that created a huge distrust for like 5 years. I remember. I mean,
On
no
all those
rep, no
products.
rep from that company would wear their shirt at events. Boy, they'd walk around, but they got hate. I mean, they about carried one of them out of the expo in Novi, Michigan when I was there forcefully. It was a thing.
Yeah, but you know what, Ryan? There were also people that loved those guys and those
Oh,
products.
100%.
Like,
I'm just
but,
speaking for the
there was
general
always
kind of
people that are
attitude.
passionate about it. But like, you know,
But
we didn't sell it at our store. I
right.
always had a policy that
Oh,
we
we
weren't
got
going to sell
asked
it.
for it too. 100%. I'm just
You
saying
know,
that's where I think part of the impression came from, as far as the hatred from, because the organic people were like, we didn't do that. We didn't do any of that shit. My cow just took a dump over there. I composted it. Now I have a plant. I'm putting that in a very small
Is
nutshell.
it a competitive thing though? Is that one of the major drivers though? Because
I
as an
think it's
organic
honestly,
guy,
I think it's taken
I
on a
wasn't.
life so much of its own. You either were an organic grower when you got into this, and that was your team, and you stick with your team, and you talk about you go with organic practices, or you're inorganic, and you're like, hey, like the question, the guy who asked the question said, like, I put, say, a few grams into a gallon of water, 5, 15, 26, couple grams of calcium nitrate, plant. Which one is
Yeah.
worse? So I don't. I think both are actually comparable, and it's not like we derive these chemicals from like terrible processes. If the worst offenders you could maybe talk about are like, I wouldn't advise you to take like a shot glass of EDTA compound, you know, but we take a lot of these compounds. So like when we do like natural gas extraction, we have the Haber-Bosch process, which we make like different kinds of sulfates with. We take the sulfur gas from the extraction while we're doing it, and it is combined with pressure and heat, and we'll have, say, potassium sulfate or something like that. So it's not like these are like, being pulled from like radioactive crude oil. Like the minerals have a very well documented process, and to even be included as an ingredient on a fertilizer label under AFCO, the whole process and acceptable levels of contaminants are documented. And if you go over that, your label doesn't get accepted. So I mean,
I hmm. One thing
hold on. Not those that are lost for words. Let's just stay there.
well, I think I should say that, like, so when he was talking about the processes and stuff like that, I think it should be said that there's lots of places on Earth that have really crappy soil.
yep.
Okay. And when we first figured out in the late 1800s how to synthesize nitrogen and how to make salts, okay, we dramatically lowered worldwide starvation.
Oh,
Yep.
Dramatically, which means a whole
yes.
bunch of women and children, a whole bunch of babies, a whole bunch of humanity were starving to death or being malnourished and growing up malnourished and stunted in their life. And that changed. And salts, the earth is not just a big ball of everywhere you want to plant, it's got everything you need. There are missing elements, there are deficiencies. I should even say, like, I was born in Chicago. There's this place, the upper Midwest used to be called the goiter belt because the soil lacked iodine. And so people would get these neck goiters. And
Yeah,
it's
that's what
actually the
happened as well.
reason why they put iodine in table salt.
Yep.
Okay.
100%.
There's a lot of places in India that are super iron deficient and led to a lot of malnourishment. And so I think it's important for people to realize that, like, when we started synthesizing things, it was seen as a miracle, and
Oh
a
yeah.
vast amount of human suffering went down.
Oh,
Okay.
100%.
And And so, and I don't think people, I think people like in the organic versus chemical debate, you're like, okay, so salts are evil. And so it's essentially like you're basically Darth Vader and you're on the dark side and you're doing the bad stuff because it's easy and you don't care. While I'm over here on the organic side full of peace and light and love and I'm fighting the good fight. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that, you know?
I have a cool example when you're done of responsible salt use.
And then, so I'll say this because I said it a billion times when Gabby and I worked together. I would tell people that my main difference between organic and non organic gardening is that non organic gardening gave the plant everything, hopeful, if your pH and your water temp and all that was correct, it gave the plant everything it was looking for in basically, hopefully, the correct amounts. Okay. And that if you grow organically, you may or may not do that to the plant because the biology and the various things going on in the soil have to break down these longer organic
In a
chains
pot. In a
to
pot.
release these salts. Like people should know, because we haven't said this yet, every plant, every cannabis plant absorbs mineral salt.
Yep,
Okay.
ionic compounds. Yep.
Some of these mineral salts are general hydroponics, so they're derived in a liquid or a powder formulation. Even if you're growing fully organically, those same salts are being released by the bacteria, the soil food web, whatever terminology you want to use. And as it breaks down those longer organic compounds, some of that salt is released. Now, what organic does that inorganic does not is I always said that, like, if you're lucky, organic will give the plant everything that it wants, plus a whole bunch of stuff that it likes. Because as it breaks
Well,
down those organic, as it breaks down those longer organic chains, it's releasing things that enzymes feed on, that bacteria and protozoa and the various things existing in, like, you know, the
Yeah.
roots having a bond with the biology of your soil and the interaction between those things, and some of those sugars and some of those things that are broken down are feeding those things.
Okay,
I'm not trying to
before
get too
I
complicated, but
before
I
like,
agree
hey
with all
Tattoo,
that
I
except
want to let you
the
answer.
thing where you said
Tattoo,
if
one
you're
second.
lucky.
Let, alrighty,
well, okay.
I'm gonna let you answer. Wait. Hold on. Let him answer. You're gonna be the next one to talk. I just want to read what somebody wrote because it was based on what Notso just said, and then you can respond, Tattoo. Well, I'm really having to moderate this one. It says, "Will plants stop feeding the microorganisms in the sub?" Oh, by the way, this is TH3 Grow on cannabis cultivation on Reddit. It says, will the plant stop feeding the microorganisms in the substrate through their root system if fed with synthetic fertilizers? And or to what degree will microbial life and the symbiotic relationship between plants and the microorganisms be hindered by adding synthetic fertilizers to a LOS system? So Tatu, you can respond to what Natso said, and then I'll have you be the first one to talk about these microbes.
So the only thing I would say, I agree with all that except for if you're lucky. I would say if you're managing your systems correctly, then you should be able to provide availability of everything
Oh,
that
I
your
don't
plant
disagree with
needs.
that at all.
And so, yeah, so I just say not lucky. You just
I just
need to
meant in the sense
manage
that,
it.
like, a lot of times, most people growing are not soil scientists, are
And
not
It
professionals,
takes,
they don't have you giving them
and
advice.
they don't know. Like, I just put green sand in my mix, and I have no idea that it's going to take 2 years for this
right.
to break
Well, and
down
I
and
think
become
there's a lot
available.
of, like I love Elaine Ingham, but I think there's a lot of messages that came out of that camp that, like, like you guys were just, you and Ryan just mentioned that, like, there's places where we grow food in the United States that are concentrated, and there's a reason because the climate, the
Hmm.
fertility, it works. There's a lot of places we don't because it doesn't.
Doesn't work.
Um, Salt's enabled us to expand that, which is great. But as far as, like, if you add a little bit of salts to an organic living soil, it's not going to go scorched earth on your biology. That we know from direct microscopy that doesn't happen, And so, like,
That
I
one's
just want to say, like,
oh,
maybe I'm not the organic guy that people were hoping would be here because I'm science based and I'm data based, and so if it's bullshit, it's bullshit. If it's true, it's true.
Well,
And so that's where I stand, and and so, like, you can add, you know, synganics. Like, how do you get these giant pumpkins? It's a combination of biology and salts. Maybe your facility makes better sense to do your veg side salt and your flower organic. There's a million ways to skin this cat. But I just want to say that, like, the biology is not going to just go scorched earth if you add a little bit of salt.
If
Sure.
you add a little bit of salt, there should be a decent amount of salt that's been organically derived from your biology available to the plant, or your plant's going to be really unhappy, in my opinion. Where
So,
where the salt issue becomes an issue is if you start feeding 3.0 EC, and you know the saline level of your mix is too high, you can start killing biology, and you can start, and that's where the issues come. But in any organic mix, there has to be enough salt that's bioavailable to be absorbed. Otherwise, your plant is going to start showing deficiencies because it needs those salts to absorb into its root mass to bring
It's
up.
all ions. All uptake is ionic, and just the differences in organics, you've
Now,
got a middleman.
so
So
there's
Ryan,
a,
we should ask Ryan a question. I think I know the answer, but I could be wrong. Can a scientist tell the difference between an organically derived or an inorganically derived ion of nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or something?
I
I
mean,
think
if
the
you
answer
go,
is yes.
well, if you go, oh, where'd I go?
You're there.
You're
See
there.
you fun.
Oh, okay. Um, sorry, it's messing. Keeps moving around. It's getting me. If
Yeah.
you go down to, the particle, if you go down to particle size small enough, no, it's indistinguishable. I mean, if you go down to elemental nitrogen without it, being like a nitrate or being an ammonia base, if you go down to like break it down to a specific particle of nitrogen, then no. I mean, as far as the plant's concerned, it needs ionic compounds, and it's either going to get that from dissociation of salts, or it's going to get that from enzymatic bacteria, soil biology, and weathering processes. So either school is going to give it to it, but it's going to be various results. But the one thing I wanted to touch, and I was itching to say, was there's actually a gentleman named Dr. Jacob Mitteleider. I believe he passed away sometime in the 80s, but he was an agronomist, and he actually derived what I call like a responsible salt use system for soil gardening in the field. It's very precise in its measurements of the mix you mix up, and it's distributed per square foot of soil very carefully, uses irrigation, and it's actually unique because I wanted to touch on it, is that we have middle-lighter gardens now that have been going for like anywhere from like 30 to 50 plus years now. So we've had the opportunity to test groundwater in these long-term middle-lighter gardens and production facilities, to do soil tests, to test the produce, and it's nigh indistinguishable because of how responsible that the compounds have been used, and that it mixes soil processes with, I would say, inorganic. It's supplemented inorganically, but you get the use of the soil as far as, it distributes the minerals. You have runoff. You have, organic effects from under it. But if anyone's interested, and you want to check out a published method of kind of inorganic meets organic outside and like field use, look up the Metal Lighter Gardening Method. It's a little book. It focuses on produce, but I think some of the lessons it teaches are applicable to cannabis.
Well, and the over application of salt fertility, I think, is where a lot of, like, the general public, maybe that hatred, that head to head kind of, because,
100%.
you look
Yeah.
at the Mississippi or whatever, and again, that's not salt's fault. That's the
No.
farmer irresponsibly over applying, or applying at the wrong time. Or maybe it was the farmer doing the best they could, and they had a freak weather event, had a bunch of intrusion, and man, it was a bad situation. And so even with the best laid plans outdoors, things can go wrong. But it just
Yes.
comes down to doing the right thing in the right place responsibly. And so salt can be a
100%.
great solution.
Well, I think a lot of I've dealt with this problem on a professional capacity. It really goes back to the centralization of agriculture. You're trying to pull wild, tonnage or bushels per acre of various crops out of a situation. And to get that, you have your fertilizer guy rolls up, does your soil test, and says you need this many tons of
Yeah.
nitrogen, this many tons of potassium, this many tons of phosphorus. And if you're like in the south or like, towards the river basin or somewhere where you have significant runoff, there's not really adequate protections in place to prevent that from happening. So it's really the Department of Agriculture, I think, has been locked in, political deadlock as far as do we tighten it up, do we make adjustments, and really decentralization of agriculture needs to happen. So no matter where you are on the political spectrum, decentralization of agriculture will have huge benefits
Well,
for the entire country and soil conditions and water
I,
conditions.
there's a point to that too. For when Gabby and I worked at the store together, there's a reason that all the bat poop is from Malaysia and Peru and Indonesia and places like that. And it's because they don't have OSHA and they're third world countries, and it's much easier to harvest, to go into those habitats, those bat caves,
Yeah.
those seabird
There's no
habitats, whatever,
protection.
and harvest all that and then ship it halfway across the world. It's not like America doesn't have plenty of bat poop. It's that after you add up all of the health regulations and all the different things, and I've been meaning to mention this, but I keep forgetting it. Gabby and I had a friend who will remain nameless, but I know two people that when they were mixing their own soil and they were very organic, they ended up going to the hospital with lung fungus
Yep.
from guano. And so even
Guano.
though it's organic and it might be so-called clean, you're dealing a lot of times in organics with either byproducts from the meatpacking industry or dried poop,
Yeah.
or things that might not be the healthiest for you to breathe or touch or get into your eyes, even though they might be organic, you know? And so people don't realize that either. That's one of the trade-offs, is that after that happened to our friend, we used to like buy these cement mixers when we grew indoors and we'd mix our own soil, in the cement mixer. We started wearing masks
Oh
and
yeah.
full-on face gear so we could
Yep.
keep all
You
that funk
should.
out of our face and out of our nose and out of our eyes. Because once homie spent 3 days in the hospital for a lung fungus and we realized it came from the guano,
Yeah.
we were like,
Somebody
oh,
died this past year. They had a suppressed immune system, but somebody died from guano
Yeah.
yeah.
exposure.
And
And I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we're losing bats because of white nose bat fungus, and it's spread with guanos. And so,
Yeah. Because
just
potassium.
because something's organic doesn't mean it's safe.
Oh man, he's saying this again.
I
He's
mean,
trying.
you know,
The truth.
well,
Truth hurts, I guess.
organic is a few things. Organic is, like, from a science perspective, it's anything that's got carbon. you know
Yeah.
from a growing perspective, there's politics involved in what gets
Yeah.
like, you take something and you treat it in one process and it can still be called organic. You treat it into another process and now it's considered inorganic, but it
Yep.
might be the same starting, like soft
The
rock phosphate or something like that. Like, there's different things that,
Yeah.
like, like you look at like things that are 100% omri, and sometimes you'll be like, oh, it's got turkey compost, it's got this, it's got that, and then you get down to it's got some sulfate of potash and it's got some this and it's got some that, and
there's a lot of end arounds and little loopholes and stuff that some organic growers use and some don't, depending on their personal, you know, ideologies. The reason I grow organically is because I am, as somebody that studies organic soil chemistry, I am very confident that I can deliver availability at optimal rates throughout a cycle with organic inputs. And so, with that said, if you take that, if you take fertility availability out of the equation, I'm using biology, hopefully, to stimulate those other things that I'm after, the volatiles, your esters, alcohols, your terpenes, those things that taste good, smell good, you know. And so that's why I grow organically, because I started off as a salt grower,
mm-hmm.
you know. I
I mean,
grew with salts forever.
there's one other point I think is kind of interesting, and then Gabby can ask more questions because we can obviously chat. But one thing I've always found immensely interesting is if you look at, like, say, native Earth is like, a quarter water, a quarter air, 45% minerals, and then like 5 to 8% organic matter in general, right? Like you can look it up on your phone on a chart, whatever.
Yep.
And
Yep.
when a lot of times when we grow indoor or we make raised beds outside or what have you that we're growing canna in, it's like 98% organic matter. It's peat moss, it's peat moss, it's cocoa fiber, it's this, it's that, it's various organic inputs. There might be some like glacial rock dust we throw in as mineral content, but it's literally a human created, like, it's very
It's a
different than
substrate. It's not a
it's a
soil.
substrate. It's very different than native earth.
100%. And you
Very
You
different.
balance
can't
that,
grow
and
in a pot
your
in native earth.
fertility targets, how you sample, all that changes.
And so
All of
you
that
can grow
changes
organic,
in
but
situ versus substrate.
you're still, especially like if we keep it to what Gabby said, we're growing in containers. Your container probably has a mix that it exists nowhere else on the planet unless humans are involved, right? And so, like, when you grow outdoors, it's like it might be 5 or 10% organic matter, not 95% or 98% like we
If
mostly
you've
grow.
got 2 to 4% outdoors, you're killing it. So
Right.
it's low,
And
you
but
know.
what percentage is it going to be in a container or in a raised bed or something?
Well, it always got like the level of detection on the test is always above 20, which is like that's the cutoff. One, you get an inflated number based on how they test it, so it's not an accurate metric that you would necessarily lean on. But there's just, I mean, it's all organic matter.
It's all
So there's
organic.
a huge, But on the flip side, compared to in situ soil, there's no true clay colloid. There's no true humates. There's nothing that's, like Ryan was saying, once you get down to a certain level with these minerals, you can't distinguish the source. That's the definition of humic acid. You can't tell if it was a, a dead squirrel or a piece of grass or, so it gets down to that super fine. And we don't have something that's truly on that level in a substrate. So you balance those, the math of those completely different.
I I also think that, like, when you're growing organically, like I learned how to grow organics from like John Jevons and people like that. I don't know if you're familiar with him and his grow more
Mhm.
vegetables and all that and composting and
Yep.
double digging and stuff. But it's like, the old style of like seasonal outdoor growing is like, you have a hole or a bed or something, and the plant pulls a certain amount of, like, energy from it, and then, like, at the end of the season you're amending it. Maybe you put some manure on it, maybe you put some different things on it, some straw, you let that break down. And now people in the legal industry, they're trying to, like, you see, like, oh, this is my 38th cycle on my living soil, or I'm going to do depths, which means I'm going to, like, snap off multiple crops in a row. And that puts strain, in my opinion, on the organic soil that you're pulling from.
You
And so,
have to add back to it. You have to amend it.
and then you have to amend it with things that are going to be available relatively quickly, you know, because you don't
What's
have
that?
time. You don't have time for like a winterization season where it might be 6 or 7 months of breaking down before the
Right,
plant is put into it again, which is like most
right.
outdoor farming. You have a down season. You have a season in which, a lot of outdoor gardening, you would put in a layer of manure, you would put on a layer of amendments or what have you. You might cover it in straw, you let it get rained on for 5 or 6
Right.
months or covered in snow.
Indoor substrates, I'm back in 24 to 48 hours after harvest with
And that
indoor
puts its own
organics.
pressures on how you have to handle that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
all
So
your,
there's a
I keep going, please.
no. I was just going to say, there's just ways to manage these things, and so like I grow very differently outdoors versus indoors. You know, but there is and there's certain things you want to check before you go back in. Can you turn that soil? Does it stay temperature stable? If not, you don't want to put bare rooted clones in there. They're going to get fried. You know, so there's just a lot to manage,
Yeah. And
but it's doable.
I just wanted to bring that up to people because it's like I think the method that you're growing, whether you're growing seasonally or whether you're growing crop after crop after crop indoor, or whether you're doing multiple depths back to back, and like you said, you're replanted within 48 hours of harvest, even just that type of thing can dramatically change what kind of inputs you use and how you want to feed your plant, you know, because they're dramatically
Yeah,
different.
So before we
100%.
go any further, I just want to quickly acknowledge we have 335 people watching here
Oh,
live,
that's
and that
Appreciate you
is a
telling me.
record for us.
great.
Probably, you know, by I don't know,
It's
40
definitely
people.
the
Thanks for
hat.
hanging out.
The hat
That's
did
the
it,
It's
hat.
the
right?
hat.
And
What
you
did
know,
he
That's
put on the hat?
I
It
love this
just
hat, man.
launched. We were mid
It's
200s,
the
and then the
return
hat
of
came
Not
on,
So
and
Dog.
boom.
yeah, the return of Notsodog. He's been extremely missed, and I haven't talked to him yet. I hope your
Well,
mom is
yeah, I mean,
doing okay.
I don't want to bring it up too much because it
I
sucks,
hope
but
she's
my
doing
mom
okay,
almost
man.
died, and it was a real bummer. She's still with us, thank God. And I just got back, and so yeah, I missed things for a little bit, but it was pretty stressful.
Yeah.
And I realized that that you're really just not prepared to lose your parents. I don't care how old you are.
Oh no, never.
I don't think it hits. Yeah. So I appreciate everyone, and
People were expressing their concern and sending love.
yeah, I mean it's.
Uh,
I'm almost 50, so it's part of life. Your parents are only going to live so long. You know, my parents are old, and but you know, uh, they
Yeah.
live far from me, so it's not like I can just shoot down the road. You know, like they live on a different coast, and so I
Thanks,
kind of had to
Gordon.
drop everything and be like, I'm going to go see my mom.
Yeah.
well,
Well,
I'm
good
glad you
good on
did.
you for being there for her. You know, I think any parent, that's all that you can hope for. Is, your kids being with you, and
We
you know.
lost Tatu Sadu. I'm sure he'll be back in a minute. In the meantime, I want to send out a special thanks to Louis Farmstrong.
Yeah.
He's my AI specialist. And dude, he made this, and I just thought that was so funny. Like this guy is just the best.
Well, you know,
Dude.
talking
Canada's
about
done deal. I love it.
working with
Thanks,
Gabby
man.
at his store, I can't tell you how many times there would be some guy that would be 100% organic and super snobbish about it in spring and summer. And then he'd come in like late August and he'd be like, you know, I'm kind of thinking my plants need a boost. What do you think about this? And I'm like, the Bud Blaster? The 05030 pink powder? And he'd be like, yeah, I mean, I give it to him one time, two times, something like that. It's still organic, but it just gives him just a little something, something to get him over the hump, you know? And, you know, so, organic is, organic is a selling term. Like when I was on Dead Tour, every nug that I bought, everybody wanted to have Humboldt County outdoor organic nugs, you know? And so there's a selling point, and um, I think there's a lot of misnomers about it too, you know? And I think just to follow up on what I also think that like what Tatsu is saying about all this and like sustainability and everything, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, we were just trying to solve starvation, and we've learned so much. We weren't able to do this kind of testing 100 years ago. We weren't able to like look at things at the molecular level. We weren't able to sort of like, debate these nuances of back and forth, you know? And so I
But
think
we
it's
did, but we did it at the Garden Spout, not online
but even
with
the garden spout is
350 people
recent. That's
listening.
only 20 years ago. I just mean that like when all this stuff got things go out in the world, like I said, like
We've evolved.
salts dramatically changed starvation,
Yeah,
you know
100%.
We've
and
evolved so fast, you know, as a human animal. My great grandmother did everything by horse. She didn't have electricity until she was an old lady. And when she died, we had a space shuttle, you know. And so, like, some of the things that we've done, some of the problems we've created, like, we didn't have time to realize we were creating them. You know, like we're still learning. We're learning so much, and in this day and age, we're learning so much so
Yeah.
fast.
And
How do you keep up?
Hold on
take
one
like the
second.
Dust Bowl,
We need
huh?
you to turn your phone, Brandon. You might have to log off and then log back on if it doesn't work, but okay,
So,
that
I
works.
mean, one example we could use is like when they talk about like the Oklahoma Dust Bowl is, people moved there and it used to be, eaten by, bison and stuff like that or whatever. And they had all these native plants that had 4, 5, 6 foot deep, like root masses. And we ripped that all up and we did row cropping and all this different stuff. And then it dried out and then the wind blew and we blew away like 6 feet of topsoil because we didn't know what we were doing,
Yep.
you know? And so every few
Oops.
decades, we learn a
Oops.
lot more about farming. And so some of this sustainability stuff, it's not like 50 years ago people were evil. They just
Yeah.
knew what they knew at the
No,
time,
Oh, sure.
you
I
know?
just
doing the best.
wanted,
We did all kinds of. We put dolomite into East Tennessee clay and tightened it up more. You know, because that's what the
Yeah,
ag
you just don't
extension
know.
guy
So
told my dad to
you learn
do.
things. And what, I mean, I used to take, I've said this before, but I used to take my juiciest Mexican nug and put it in the resin chamber. So as I smoked from my metal
I
pipe,
did
my
too.
juicy nug
I
would get
did.
all this free extra resin on it, and it would be uber potent when I pulled it out. Because that was what the older cats that were smoking told me was the cool way, and that was the secret thing to get the extra THC that would go over your
so
bud.
I just wanted real quick to comment.
Gross. I did it
Huh?
too.
I just wanted to quickly comment on the pinned comment that Gabby flashed up about how salts didn't help, starvation and famine, and that's propaganda. There's very few times where I'll send an absolute just you're wrong, but this is one of those times. Um,
Yeah.
the fact is the Haber Bosch process. If it was invented, there's probably a good chance that you wouldn't be here. The fact that it allowed us to even develop mechanical farming to get yield. It allowed us to have yield to where we needed mechanical farming to pick it up. And it is how the world is fed. It's how corn is grown. It's how soy is grown. All those byproducts and petroleum inputs and everything like that goes with those, soy and plant-based materials. That all comes from that process. We
Haber
would not
Bosch
be
changed the
able
world.
we would not be able to feed the population as it is, as romantic notion as it is, to mix up all of that, like organic inputs and stuff like that to feed the world. Like the population wouldn't be what it is today. Fact. I mean, that's
We
just facts.
were at 1 billion people in the 1800s,
Yeah,
and we learned that method.
we're at like what,
And in
five
the
now
next
almost?
100 years, we shot up to 8 billion people or
More
something
than
because
yeah.
we weren't
Yeah.
starving. We weren't starving. And so
Yeah.
you could say that's a negative, you know? Oh,
Yeah,
hold on. My kid is knocking. I got to go let her in. I'll be right back.
there you go.
Alrighty.
Yeah, yeah. That doesn't discount any of the pros and cons of inorganic versus organic, and it definitely doesn't take away any of the virtues of organic farming. But the
Yeah. As an
agriwash
organic
and
guy, you're
mechanized farming
100% right.
allows modern society to be what it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. As the organic hardline organic guy here, you're 100% right. And that's the thing. Like we can't argue about, like you said, there's very few things I would put like a declarative statement on. That's one of them.
And
Yeah.
keep in mind, I'm an environmental scientist. I have developed organic products. I am an organic person, but I work in the world of inorganic and synthetic in places. And so I recognize the accolades. I think we need vastly decentralized inorganic agriculture. That's, I think, 1,000% necessary. But it's also important to recognize that currently, until we figure out a more efficient, better way of doing things, you know, a lot of the byproducts that you use in organics comes from an inorganic farm.
And, first, the big issue was figuring out how to not starve.
Yep.
And now that we've done that, we can sort of figure out more sustainable more ecologically friendly, happier ways to not starve. But to say that it was like, it's probably like, honestly, synthetic salts are probably one of the greatest innovations in terms of quality of life, you know, because it
Most
brought
important.
food. Because it brought food. So I'll say something that's kind of interesting. I don't even know if you know this, Gabby. I had a buddy of mine that I grew up with that went to the University of Iowa Ag Department, and they have one of the most developed ag. They're very famous for their ag department because it's like in the heart of, you know, uh, the Midwest food belt or whatever. And he went down with his PhD professor to Cuba, which was almost impossible to get into at the time because Cuba did the largest scale transition from conventional to organic agriculture that had ever happened at the time, because they used to be subsidized by the USSR, and the USSR, the Soviet Union, used to send them a bunch of salt fertilizer, and then they stopped when they fell apart. And then we had an embargo with them, so the whole country had to switch to organic farming. And that they created all these different like composting things. It was illegal to throw out organic matter. You had to put it into certain containers. It had to be brought to the local, as Ryan was saying, like the local like composting. They had to do a lot of rules and regulations and create crimes in order to get the community to switch from their habits, because all of a sudden it's not an easy thing to just flip a light bulb and be like, we're going to feed all these people organically, sustainably. There's not enough compost, there's not enough organic products. It would take a giant shift, and I'm not saying it might not be worth it to do so, but I'm just saying it's not like flipping a switch.
No, it would be an entire societal shift. Every faucet of our daily lives would have to be examined. Everything from mandatory electronics recycling to water purification to waste handling to composting to the chemicals that you can even buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. I mean, it would be a massive thing. I'd love to live to see it. I am an environmental scientist, and I always get in trouble with this with Aptus because I'll talk about the pros of inorganic and mechanized society, but it's like, don't get me wrong, I understand the bad parts and I understand the parts that need work on, because again, decentralization and everyone doing more organic practices is the best thing you can do to help. You know, just everyone do your part and it'll get better. But
But
we should take
I
another
just wanted to
question,
throw,
Gabby.
yeah,
And,
sorry.
and like, like there's always somebody that's going to take like I think the salt people that get mad at the organic people, they get mad, maybe rightfully so, because there is this kind of like, I'm sure you guys saw it in the dead scene. There's always somebody that's a little headier than everybody else, and so like I can see where, salt growers would get sick of that,
Bro,
Oh
you
yeah.
you
that
you light your
vibe,
weed with a lighter? I light my weed with
right?
virgin wood, and I let the sulfur burn off. Oh, I don't even do that. I only smoke when the sun's out
Right,
because I use the magnifier, because I can taste it otherwise. I
right,
mean, it's
right,
very,
right.
you want to get heady.
Heretics,
You want to get
heretics.
heady.
Right, right.
There are subsets within the heady, and you can just
I'll
keep.
tell you what, if anyone in
Yeah,
here has like an idea of
yeah.
how to have a large scale organic process, do it cheaply and sustainably, I am telling you that you could be a multi millionaire. Because I'll tell you what, as somebody who's involved in some commercial projects as well, and some in food production, like if you bring something organic that can take like a lot of their work away, or it's very easy to implement, and they get a measurable result, boy, they will write you that check before you. They'll just hand it to you. You didn't even see them write it. Like the market is hungry for those solutions. So if you've got them, you've stumbled across something, make it known.
And so the only reason why I threw that out there, it's just like, I think a lot of times people look at the way the world is now, and they think, oh, well, how could we have done this? And they don't really realize like where we were before
Yeah,
that thing
right.
happened,
You have to know where
and
you've been
how
to
we
know where
got
you're
there,
going, right?
and all that. And so, like we basically not completely, but we've almost solved starvation. And so now we just have to figure out how to solve it on a more sustainable, ecologically friendly level.
And we got to keep as far as like acknowledging the conversation that the goals for food production are usually quantity. You know, we've obviously dropped measurably in, you know, our nutrient to calorie intake since the 1920s has, you know, has changed dramatically.
Oh, the
It's
mineral
and
density in our food has gone down so much, and that's the big thing that I do in my research and my passion project with Mineralize is to work on that. Sorry, this is Thomas. He comes in the live
No,
sometimes.
Thomas is fine.
yeah, Thomas is cool. But yeah, so we, you know, and so in food, you know, we may not care about a biological relationship that may drive a terpene expression, or, you know, there may be no need for it in a certain situation. So again, like the number one rule of agronomy is like every plant in its place, and that includes the protocols to grow it there, you know.
What's your question, Gabby?
You're muted,
I was
Gabby.
I was messing with my microphone, so I muted myself. I'm gonna read a couple more of these questions.
Yeah, let's do some questions.
Next time, I'm gonna be a little bit more prepared and print them out or something, because as I'm scrolling through them, and there was good questions, but so many of them are the same and start with like the same like attack vibe from the very beginning. Okay,
There's no
so
need for an attack vibe. Period.
this is our first ask us anything, and I definitely think we should do more. We had a great response, but here we go from Farm Band Me on cannabis cultivation on Reddit. As a KNF organic farmer, I'm hybridized. I don't know what he's saying. Hybridization my microbiome to maximize the efficiency and voraciousness of my soil and all that grows in it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms which work in conjunction to break down organic material and make it bioavailable to the plant. Why do salt growers think that force feeding a handful of chemical complexes can recreate or better produce the multitude of nutrient analogs that a thriving organic soil can? And I want to answer first, and then we'll let you guys go. Number one, we are talking about container gardening, okay? And as we said before, like if you try to do that KNF stuff in your house, you are probably gonna, if you have a lady, you won't after this, you know, like she's gonna throw you out. So we're talking about container gardening. I think we all agree that like, you know, right now my backyard is all pavers. I have no earth. Okay, but if I had acres of land, I would nurture the soil and grow organically. Okay, but indoors or even outside in a container, I think growing organic, you kind of, it's just not what I would do. Now, the thing that he said that made me want to read it, he says, why do you want to force feed? What'd you say, Tatu?
I said I would.
You would what?
I'd grow out. So I would grow in a container.
Yeah, okay.
I would grow in a
All right, yeah.
container.
I
I'd
get
grow
it.
in an old tennis shoe.
And you
know?
you can tell us about that in a second, because I'm going to pass it over to you. But I don't think we're force feeding. I almost think sometimes it's the opposite. You know, that like we are just delicately giving it. I mean, you don't have to feed your plants an EC of 10. You know, you can give your plants a very mild, mineral fertilizer that has everything it needs, where other people, I'll never forget at the Garden Spout, me and Francis would show up at people's places to make a delivery, and they would be filling pots with soil that was steaming.
Yeah.
It's like they're the ones that were like jamming down all this ammonical nitrogen on their plants, and I mean it was just.
Well,
so,
I mean, in relation
I
to
don't see it as
that,
force feeding.
they're like, if people, I mean, I've seen it happen a bunch, but it's like, people mix a fresh soil and it's got too many wood products or something like that in it, and then the biology breaking down that lignin in the wood steals so much nitrogen that there's none left available for the plant to absorb until that process is done. And so I think organic and salt is a very broad term, and I think people pick extremes to make their example against the other one sometimes.
Yeah, because like with what you just said, like hugel culture. I just had this conversation with somebody earlier today because they wanted to add a bunch of wood chips to their substrate. And I think that's why people give up on hugel culture, is because you pack these beds full of wood, and the bacteria in the soil demand, anywhere from 18 to 1 to 24 to 1. They demand that carbon to nitrogen ratio. And
Yeah.
until they're satisfied, they're not letting go of any of that nitrogen for your plant.
And it's
And
locked
so,
in there.
yeah. And so that doesn't mean that hugel culture is bad. It means that that person had an expectation that it would provide a certain performance in a time frame that it just wasn't going to happen. And so, it's
Here's
again,
another
it's just
question.
understanding the process.
We used to get this in Mendo, like the smart people, they would get like a fresh organic soil mix,
The season before.
or like in December, January or something, and let it cook for 5 or 6 months, and let it, like, in the beginning it might smell like a tire fire, because as all that biology breaks down stuff within the soil can actually get quite hot.
Yeah.
I have a friend who grows in 15-gallon pots indoors, and he sets up his pots for the next run. He's got like double or triple the amount. I think it's triple the amount of pots that he needs to use, because he's always got one he's using, one he just made, and it's like he can't use his soil for a couple months after he makes it, because he puts meals and other things in there, and he needs a few months for the biology to sort of like reach an equilibrium.
Sure.
And if you plant in too hot a soil, you could have stuff in there that's not available to the plant, because there's all this biology
Yeah, you
happening,
can.
and it's cooking, and it's going to cook the roots.
Yeah,
I guess
just
it
the
would
temperature.
the piles would be steaming. This potting soil that would be steaming.
So-
Like I think it was like Power Flour. Or
Yeah,
I
Power
don't
Flour is
remember
awesome.
what it was that we used to buy in bulk. Like,
Power
it was-
Flour was amazing. Power Flour, they
was
ran
it
out of it.
that you'd get that would be steaming, or would it be from like
Spy
one of
Rock
those-
mix from
Yeah.
North American Organics. But Power
that.
Flour, what was so special about them was they came in a brown bag, and they had enough food in it for 3 months. And so it was designed that you could like slit a hole in the top and put a plant in it and just water, right? But what made it special was, long before the cannabis industry had a bunch of like teas and biologically available things that were easy to buy, Power Flour had this ancient bog in northern Mendo that had all this like really amazing biology in it. And so they were able to scoop some of that and dump it into their soil mix. And that was a very aged and very balanced microbiome.
Sure.
And that broke down the inputs they put in there really well. And
Oh.
it performed well.
I wanted to take a
And-
stab
and-
at the original.
Oh, you
I
wanted to
see
what?
people chasing. Oh,
What did you say, Ryan?
Oh, sorry. I wanted to take a stab at the original question. I wasn't
Go
sure
for it.
if
Shoot. Yeah, 100%.
So when he was asking, using the analogy of K&F to modern practices, so I think with K&F, it's important to understand where K&F comes from. It comes from, Master Cho in the Orient, and having to develop methods that farmers could use on site, on their land, where they are. And the whole goal of K&F is to just grow microbes, just have soil that would walk away with your sandwich if you put it down. I mean, that is the goal of K&F. Using fermentations, using what's around, and to utilize K&F properly, you need a large body of soil. If you go all the way to like IMO4, where you make it into its dry, like solid form, you need compost piles. It's like Gaby and Notsodog have talked about, making large amounts of IMO inside and go through the whole process. I think, so when you do K&F adequately, where you have you're putting with lab, you've got your fermented plant juice and extracts, and you're on your biology, and you're basically, amending your fields or your cultivation area, you're bringing that plot of soil up so many notches of what it could produce otherwise. And you balance that with the inputs that you bring into it, because you have a net removal when you're taking flower and products out of like a KNF environment. You're putting ferments and biology and like lactobacillus and things like that in there, but you're taking significant tonnage out of the soil when you harvest your product, just like anything. Then you also have to have the products and resources to put back in, whether that be local fish, it could be properly composted manure that you could put back in. But that's why I think largely people do KNF and organics, is that they understand the process, they have a desire to have the result and a desire to use their local inputs or be self-sustaining as much as they can. Whereas if you're doing inorganic, I would say on large, um, the most largest common user, you're in an indoor setting, you don't have a facility, you don't have land, or maybe you have a small greenhouse and you don't have the time or bandwidth, or maybe you don't have the interest in these processes. But not to say that's a reason to just not pick organic processes when available. But I think that's why, the long and short of it, to wrap it up, is the purpose of you as a grower. If ecology is important to you, if soil health is important to you, you really want to be a steward of your land, you're probably much more drawn to KNF versus somebody who's running a facility, you know, or having a recreational grow of some kind. And I don't think that the right term of force feeding, I think the plant's going to uptake what it can in the conditions that the fertilizer gives it. So if you water a plant with, say, 3EC solution, the goal of fertilization is the process of osmosis, where you have nutrition moving up from a gradient of higher concentration, which is the fertilizer, to a lower concentration of the plant. The plant is only going to uptake however much it can on the conditions that the application of fertilizer has resulted in and your environment. So, kind of putting that full circle, that goes with what Gabby says. Like, some of the best cannabis he's seen is stuff where you just don't feed a bunch, where or Notsodog, where you just don't feed it so heavily. That's and where I kind of talked about the middle lighter method, which is a whole method of gardening based on that. Very small amount of salt per square foot periodically. So you can kind of see we're all dancing around, the kind of truth of it all. You know, moderation. I'm sorry, Thomas. But but moderation would do a lot of inorganic practices well, and we're fortunate to have Tatsu's company who puts effort into it, and just like organics and being open about what the levels of your stuff is and putting effort into your research, would do organics a lot of good. So there's a lot of people in this group who kind of see the same ending of the tunnel, I think.
One thing I thought, if we're talking about like how to grow better weed, that I think is like pretty important, and this is just totally like my bro observation, so feel free to shoot me down, but I think that small amounts of stress could contribute to terpene production, could contribute to resin production. You don't want super stress that like almost kills your plant or anything like that. But I do think that like let's say you're in an indoor facility and like you're monitoring moisture content and you're able to keep it in this narrow band constantly, this perfect watering of air water ratio and all that. That's never how a plant outside ever developed.
No,
either, and so plants are used to getting a little bit over wet sometimes, a little bit over dry sometimes. Sometimes like I found, like, if you water a plant when it's almost droughted but not droughted, that might have pulled more oxygen into the soil, and
sure.
and feed aerobic bacteria the right way, where if you keep it too wet, it'll feed the wrong kinds of bacteria. And so sometimes I think like when people get all excited about science, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like you start like manipulating this like plants to a level we never were before,
Sure, you shape them to something that's unnatural. Because
and like, yeah,
number one yield enhancers are
We've
CO2 at the
we've
leaf,
got lots of
oxygen
data
at the
that
root.
shows exactly.
Uh-oh.
We've got a lot of data that shows exactly not so that what you're saying is true. Like there's the data corroborates what you're saying. Like there's a lot of controlled stress that will help with trichomes and terpenes and drybacks, especially towards the end, and like the impact of herbivory, like how strong that is on terpene production and that kind
yeah. I mean, that's
of
just
stuff.
me
So the data matches
observationally.
up with the observation.
Yeah,
Oh
just
yeah,
looking at that,
Yeah,
it's like
dead
perfectly
on.
grown, never stressed cannabis seems not quite as good sometimes as stuff that, and I don't mean like by stress, I don't mean like you're beating the tar out of it and your plant's almost dying. I mean like, it almost wilts, but it doesn't.
sure.
Controlled stress,
Yeah, controlled
stress on
stress,
purpose. Yeah.
or even like, the whole like super cropping thing where you like, you break the branch a little bit, but it grows back stronger and then it sends a bunch of energy into that branch, which then allows the branch to be stronger, which then allows the bud on it to be
Yeah,
bigger.
I love my super cropping, boy. I love seeing that
Yeah.
hedgerow under the HPS right before flowering.
Or even certain kinds of lighting spectrum indoor or the sun where you get a little bit of UV or you get this or that, and that might create like maybe more crystal content because the
Yep.
plant's defending itself, and then what it's defending itself with is THC and formation of
Well,
stuff
it
like that.
mobilizes different compounds to as a stress responses, right? We've seen at Aptus where we've actually gone with a scanning microscope, and we've actually seen the plant mobilize like the silica from the silicic acid facilitator to the sites of where fungal spores land on the leaves. You can see it, and as well as where if bugs will start chewing, the plant will actually mobilize silica to the point to help make the tissue worse, or harder for the pest to chew down on by strengthening the cell walls. So I think with legalization, I think there's going to be almost a second renaissance for cannabis for about 5 to 10 years, where we're going to be discovering very specific results of very specific stressors in these plants, because really, because of the classification, we've been hindered to do some real global peer reviewed and open research, and we're going to find out a lot more about this plant as it gets more legal. I can tell you that much.
It even could be like coffee that we find that certain cultivars do better grown under a 20 or 30% shade cloth or in a
Yeah,
greenhouse that has a woven poly that removes and diffuses a certain amount of light depending on where you are. There's a lot of nuances to a living thing. And the weird
100.
part about it,
12-12, the
huh?
standard 12-12.
Yeah.
We know that plants can flower.
We're
So
losing him.
yeah, we're losing your
Biomass, if you run
vocals.
it that longer.
Should
Sorry, I keep getting
No, it's
my
fine, dude.
internet.
You just all of a sudden you just started going in and out from total silence to verbiage and then back and forth, and so we get like every other sentence or something.
sh- oh,
Cut off and then come back. Try
should we
logging
take
off and then coming
should we
back.
take another question before you come while he
Yeah,
comes back?
take a question.
Well, the one thing that I had that I wanted to ask, I wanted to make sure that he hears. Tattoo, you need to just log off and then log back on. I don't know if
I don't know if
hear
he can
me.
hear you. Oh, reconnecting. He's got a bad signal. He's been doing that a bunch the
I mean,
whole show.
he lives in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I
Um,
get
Another
it.
two of them.
But I mean, this question is going to have an obvious answer. It says, why not use both together? People say the liquid nutrients will hurt the microlife in the soil, but this is not true. There have been agricultural studies that I've read showing that the opposite is actually true, and using both together increases soil life and also has benefits in larger, more proficient harvests. So why not use both? I do, and it works great. That's from Silver P Sunshine on cannabis cultivation on Reddit.
Yeah, he's exactly right. I
That's
mean,
what I think we've all.
he's we've talked.
Every one of us except for Tattoo feels that way.
We've touched on like the middle method of using specific dry measured fertilizer per square foot of where your stems are for the plant, and you allow for certain things. I mean, you know, yeah, you're absolutely right. What that does is when you're reasonable with choosing the specific fertilizing compounds, like the minerals that you're inputting, along with the organic base, you can give them, you can basically remove that limiting factor of like the natural like weathering, enzymatic, or bacterial processes that make something available. You could supplement that specific at a certain amount and let the compounds break in over time, so you get that mineral diversity, you get that ionic compound diversity, you get the quality, you get the stimulant, but you remove the limiting factor and allow the organics to actually have an even stronger effect. I mean, completely agree. I mean,
I agree
that's
as
what
well.
Aptus is based on. That
Even
Aptus is
if,
completely based on this idea.
and this is even like a pro bottle thing, even if you wanted to stay completely organic, there are certain bottled organics out there that they've done, whether it's fermentation, they've done this, they've done various processes to make the nutrition more available to the plant.
Yep.
So even if you were to take like, like Biocana or something like that, that has a specific NPK and it's really available, it's completely organic, it's OMRI, it's plant-based, whatever, and you add that to your soil mix that you have, you know, really to me, it's like, it's about availability. Does the
Yep.
plant have the right amount of nutrition in the soil to absorb into itself when it wants to?
Sure,
And
and that's, you're exactly right, because I mean one of the first nutrients to do this right on a large scale was actually a product by GH Europe, which was Biosevia. They actually brought, I annoyed the piss out of them for years to bring that product at shows. Whenever I'd see a rep in person, first request, because they actually tried to make organic hydroponics possible, because they were one of the first people to do organic colloidal nutrients on scale, and they did it so evenly, and I loved it. But that's definitely right with organics. Lining up your particle size, or how fast it breaks down, to what's been broken down to what will break down, all of that has to be measured and put in right, and that's what makes a great, organic nutrient. And there's some good ones out there.
yeah, so don't feel shame because you're buying an organic bottle. They might
No,
have done some process, they might have done some fermentation, they might have done any number of things that just saved you a bunch of time and made organic nutrition more available. And if you're growing in containers,
yeah, like fish
you're
hydrolysate's a perfect ingredient of widely available, pre-digested when it's quality. There's some people who blend it with extract, and those are bad.
so
But
yeah, don't hate on bottles because bottles might contain completely organic nutrition that's just more available, and that could blend in with your soil mix that you made, and it could make a synergy there. And I think when people are talking about synganic, especially in indoor pots, they might have an organic soil base and they're adding a very low level salt mix to it
right.
just because it's available, and they're sort of blending that biology and slow release with the soil with a little bit of like organic in the food. And so
Oh,
um
welcome back.
yeah, there's lots of ways to get there, but the bottom line is that if the plant wants to absorb something and it can't, it's not going to reach its potential, right? Like, you want, ideally, whether you're growing organically or salt based, you want the plant, when it starts reaching for certain nutrition, it to be there in a form that the plant can pull into itself,
Sure.
especially in flowering. In veg, you can like sort of recover from mistakes. I feel like in flowering, the plant is doing something important every day.
It's
And
largely
so
And if you haven't front loaded specific fertility, calcium,
right.
potassium, like you're not going to catch up in flower. It's too late,
No, it's once you go down that process,
especially
I've
in
seen
organic.
people re-veg stuff, but I mean, really, I mean, it's an annual, right? It's a photo period sensitive annual. So when you enact this process and it's locked in, I mean, there's a myriad of pathways that switch, of hormones that are going. I mean, you know, it's going that way, and you
yeah,
want to be
like
ready
you
for it.
you mess up or you have some kind of massive stress from pH or whatever happens in week 3 or 4, you're probably not recovering. Your
No,
plant's going to be
it won't. Even
substantially
if it
different.
turns out decent, you've lost some of what it could have been. You've lost potential. Like as good as it could, as good as you can make it at the end, you've lost what it could have been by having such a bad shift going into flower for sure. Sorry, Gabby raised his hand.
Well, I have another question.
Yeah.
This
Sure.
one comes from Dave from Bojulero.
Okay.
So he's watching
Hey,
us.
right on.
Yeah, he said great show, and he asked if he could ask a question. I was like, of course. So he said, how would the nutrient requirements for sativas or long flowering varieties differ from shorter flowering varieties? They're in beds and pots, and what are good options for sativas in terms of slow-term release nutrients?
So I'd like to take a quick
So,
stab at this. So this is
sure.
something that I work at with Aptus, is that we actually developed a flowering system to kind of work better with different photo periods, or sorry, different flowering time frames. Is that we largely separate the phosphorus from the potassium supplementation. So when you have an 8-week strain versus say a 12, or even some of like the really wild hazes, that just, do they ever finish flowering? Nobody knows. But you can adjust the point at which you stop putting excess phosphorus in, and wind it down, and then you can ramp up the potassium to the end, which really gives you that nice, kind of good cellulose hard structure. And without the excess phosphorus, you actually have, without excess phosphorus and excess potassium, you actually have more mineral availability of what would common show up as like a CalMag deficiency. So to put that in a nutshell, one way is to stagger your phosphorus and potassium inputs to what's needed. So with like a 8-week strain, really by week 3 or 4, we stop phosphorus, like excess phosphorus. It stays in the base, but we switch primarily to an amino chelated potassium and sulfur at the end. And we found that through product R&D, we found that always pushes the better result. And when we have like the 12-week plus, we'll run the phosphorus out, say almost, and ramp it down to the point where we go all the way up, say like to the half, or maybe even a 2 weeks over the halfway point, and we wind it down slowly, and then we hit the potassium to emulate the same cycle. So as far as feeding differences versus 8 versus 12-week and above, just managing your phosphorus and potassium input the best way you can really, in our testing, has shown the best results.
I would
And it
say one
depends
other
on
thing
how they're growing.
Yeah.
Salt
is
or is,
And you
uh,
can do this with organics too. I mean,
long flowering
no,
sativas,
no, it's
not
what I
all
do
of
for
them.
a living. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's what I do for a living is provide fertility with organic inputs.
I found that a lot of not all of them, but a lot of long flowering sativas seem to get by on a lot less nitrogen than say some of the more heavy indica varieties. And like
yeah,
if you feed the way you'd feed an indica, you might get like that ram's horn curl on the leaf and stuff like that, because I don't know if I don't know if the biology, but I don't know if the plant just is able to use a lot less nitrogen.
I feel like because I've always, and I can't back this up through like a study, but I've always kind of felt just in my own observances with them, because they have like a longer lifespan, they seem to accumulate, because cannabis is an accumulator plant, which is the basis of a lot of all of our nutritional advice and what we observe. I always felt that because they're around that much longer, they tend to accumulate nitrogen for longer at an even level. So I don't know, I've always kind of put it in my head that that's why, like, that length of accumulation kind of offsets the ability to just chomp some of the nitrogen. And the breeding could be part of it too. A lot of the heavier indica strains are cuts are furthered, or really lean towards indoor cultivation. I think a lot of the longer flowering ones, I think, have a bit more heirloom in them.
One thing I might want to add to what you not what you just said, but what you said in the beginning that I found really interesting is, again, when I worked at the store with Gaby, Canna started selling its nutrition in America. And they were nervous about it at first because their name was Canna, and it was obviously
Oh yeah,
tied directly to cannabis and da 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 da. And so we used to do this song and dance where all the nutrition was technically not for that, right?
yeah,
But the interesting thing about Canna was that because cannabis was legal in Holland for seed production and everything else, they were actually able to grow cannabis with their nutrient mixes and then do leaf testing and figure out what the plant was absorbing. And
yeah.
they were the first people to tell me that when like you were mentioning, that's what made me think of it when you were mentioning excess phosphorus or whatever, that they were like, what you want to do is right when the plant stops stretching and is about to begin serious flower set, you want to give a week or so of excess phosphorus and potassium, like your PK booster or what have you. And then that plant stores it in itself and it uses that excess.
It does.
And he was like, you know, a lot of people in the cannabis industry will tell you you want to use you want to use your hardener like the last 2 or 3 weeks of bloom. And he's like, that's absolutely a terrible idea. You're just going to end up with a bunch of excess in your plant. You
Yep.
want to use it at that earlier phase so it has time to utilize that excess within itself for those processes. But by the time it gets to the end, it's used it up and you've just got what's naturally occurring.
Yeah, 100%. Like,
And I thought that was really interesting because he was one of the first people that was actually able to bring like science to the bro science.
right.
Because back
So,
in 2003, 2004, or whatever, when we were
welcome
first
back,
doing
buddy.
this, it was like we weren't able to study it that way.
Right.
Like companies would give their product to growers and be like, tell me what you think.
And that goes back to full circle what you were saying earlier about less feed over time. You tend to get a better result, and I think cannabis is a prime example of that. And like we have a clean feeding schedule where you only feed the combined PK booster for 2 weeks in flower.
Mm-hmm.
And people fight me on all the time. I'm like, look, I promise you, weeks 2 and 5 you throw it in, and then it gives the plant to burn out all the excess phosphorus because nitrogen and phosphorus cannabis loves to accumulate if you give it the chance.
Well, like I said way earlier in the show, cannabis wants to suck up as much food as it possibly can so
Oh
that
yeah,
when it gets fertilized, it's able to make a
make
bunch of
seeds. Yep.
mature, healthy seeds. And that the whole time that we're growing seedless, it's waiting for this
Right,
thing that never happens.
right. It's ready to go. It's ready to make
It
those thousands
wants
and
it's
thousands of
waiting.
seeds.
Its whole mission in life is to get
Yep.
chock full of pollen and begin to the process of using all this excess nutrition to make the seed. It's
Yep.
not wanting to grow perfect smoke for us. We have to sort of like manipulate it and trick it a little bit because it
Yeah.
just wants to make seed.
Yeah. No, it's just a photo. It's just an annual. It's an
It just
annual
it
that
wants
flowers,
it,
gets pollinated, and would make seeds
and I
overall.
think to some degree too, like this is like getting off track just slightly, but I think to some time like hermaphrodism and stuff like that was like a really successful you know way
Great
for
survival
cannabis to like
method for it.
continue its species.
Oh yeah.
And the longer it goes without getting fertilized, the more panicked it becomes, wanting to be fertilized. And in some cases, the slightest stress or something happens, it might be like, oh man, I better do this thing. Otherwise, I'm going to fail.
Yep.
And I know it's not consciously
Yep.
doing that, but there's this thing where it's like, for generations, people smoked seeded weed. So nobody cared that if there was hermaphrodism in there because it was like, you know, and now people think it's the greatest evil. But it's in there. And it's been in there for a long time because it was like genetically, it was probably a pretty successful strategy when
Oh,
everything
I
else
mean,
failed.
imagine a bird picks it up, flies somewhere where there's no cannabis pollen, it grows, certain set of stressors, it drops seeds on its own, and then you've got a new colony. It's
Yeah.
definitely.
And so I kind of think of that. I always think of like what is the plant trying to do? And then what am I trying to coax the plant into doing?
Oh, we got this gentleman here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Dave.
Hey everybody, this is
What's
Dave
up, everybody?
Budgulero. He
Hello.
asked a question, and since
Yeah.
we're having some problems keeping Tatu Sadu, I asked him if he wanted to join us. And
Oh,
if you have any
Rob,
fertility questions, you can feel free to ask Ryan, who, as you can tell, is a specialist. But one thing I want to add before you do is, so what you guys said about long flowering plants not needing as much nitrogen. So this is the opposite of what I've told people for years. And the reason why I tell them this, and I want you to correct me because, like, the other 309 people watching, hopefully I'm here to learn. But what I always told people is you should give the long flowering plants nitrogen deeper into flowering than you would a short flowering plant, because if you don't, it's going to use it all. If a
Sure.
plant is going for 16 weeks and you've only got enough nitrogen in there for it to live an 8-9 week crop,
Yeah.
to me that's, but so tell me what you think, Ryan. And
Yeah.
Gabe, thank you for joining us.
I'll definitely say that I'm not a specialist in some of the longer hazes. I'm relying on my experience as a former store manager, and then my experience in Aptus now and what we've tried with customers, and that has worked. Um, but when you have these longer photo period, or not photo period, sorry, longer flowering term plants, cannabis above all is an accumulator. That's why hemp is used to like pull heavy metals out of soil and remediate soils, and that same behavior is in cannabis sativa. And especially when you have easily available nitrogen, I think over time, I think starting out they could use a little more, but as you go into bloom and that flowering period really drags on, the by weight, cannabis can hold more nitrogen than any other element that you can fertilize with. And so it just tends to accumulate proportionally more of it versus other elements if it's available. So we always get to the point where when I help customers that grow these plants, we always get to the point like week 3 or 4 of flowering, they almost get like locked in time syndrome where the plant stops responding or it shows signs of parent deficiency or toxicity. And a lot of the time, it's we dial that down. The foliage color will equal out, and it is just everyone has an easier time and they're successful. So um, not the definitive answer, but it's an answer that I've gained just through the experience.
Yeah, I found that the nitrogen can bring on certain buds, and the thinking that you need to add more fertilizer to get to the end is kind of what we've been taught, but with certain things can be, kind of not the case. And so I'm looking at this from like, as I started watching the show today, started thinking about okay, the mineral, the chemi side of things, because I've been talking with my father-in-law a lot about building soil and how to do that over time, but the timing of it, so that way when you're planting, things are broken down, they're not still breaking down. So you're doing it
Right.
properly, as opposed to like, oh, I'm doing this thing that's popular, but then you're not doing it right, so you end up having problems, right? So making sure that whatever you're doing it correctly. And I do think there can be, like you said, some benefit to some of these quicker acting nutrients, that are more available, Gabby, like we've been talking about, but also exploring the option of doing slow release, but kind of long term supply of nutrients. So that way they have a little bit all the way through, but especially with the nitrogen, not too much, balancing the amount that's in there so they can take it when they need it, but you're not oversupplying it, so it's as a almost a 25-year grower, this balancing of nutrients has been more challenging than something that takes 8 to 10 weeks that doesn't really have enough time to screw up too fast if you don't do anything totally off track.
Sure.
uh, but you double that with going from 50-degree days in March when we plant to 115-degree days or 100-degree days in June and July, that affects the nutrient uptake also. And it's just this much harder thing to balance over time because of all of those swings.
Right.
Um, and so just making sure it's there, but not too little, not too much. I guess you got to get some science in there to really know what's going on. Um,
And you
This
got
is
to deal with
total.
each individual element separately.
Right.
Like the hydro world always said, push that cow mag. Well, we know that elevated magnesium at the end of your harvest is not going to be good for you. We know that elevated nitrogen is not going to be good for you. We want to taper off all these things. So we want to have targets. We want to have metrics.
Yeah,
You
I
can't.
mean,
That's I think the thing that people find fault with organics is because there's a certain school
goodness. Your audio keeps kicking out on us.
He sent me a message saying his internet is crashing, so we
I
might
mean,
lose that too.
I'll say one thing on that too is that I like this is like hip. This is like old school hippie bro science. But there used to be this thing where you know people would make these organic mixes, and people would like try to feed the plant up to a certain point and then just ride off the level of nutrition that the plant had
thought that you could
absorbed.
just throw
So you
whatever.
would get like the perfect fade, or like
Right.
you would be like and the idea was sort of like based on like if the plant was growing in nature, it would soak up a bunch of food around itself in early times, and then it would probably sort of start to run out right from where it was planted, and then it would have to like use up what was inside itself. This is completely before science or we had any ability, but like there was a lot of people that growing in containers, which I know this show is about, which is trying to like grow organically, have enough food in there to get through to the end, but sort of like be semi-starving the plant towards the end, right? Where you ran out of the organic food and the
Right.
plant started eating itself before harvest. And then that we thought led to cleaner, smoother, happier smoke. And then the one other thing I wanted to say is that I feel bad for the CalMag because I feel like it was half right in that calcium was almost considered to be like the fourth NPK. Like it's considered like a really, really
It
important
almost
mineral.
became the fourth digit on the label.
And so plants I do think need sometimes more calcium than they get from their base mix, but they don't need it with magnesium and excess nitrogen. And a lot of CalMag is made from cal nitrate,
Yeah.
and magnesium is really easy to move through the plant, and I don't think you need nearly as much of it as you need calcium. So
No,
it would have been better if more earlier on, both organically and salt wise, there was more calcium only additives.
I
Because
mean,
people, when they were
yeah,
adding CalMag, they were like half right.
right.
But it's like in order to put enough calcium into the plant,
Well, that's one
you're
additive K&F got right is water soluble calcium. Making a good batch of water soluble calcium. You can do eggshells, but I kind of cheat a little bit. When I make it, I actually buy a lab grade micronized calcium carbonate,
okay.
and I will charge that vinegar full of every bit of damn calcium that it can get into it. And that's exactly the purpose that I'll use it for. So, for all those people who think I'm some kind of inorganic extremist, um, I do
I thought
use
calcium
K&F for.
carbonate wasn't as available for plants.
Well, if you get it into a very micronized form and you mix it with the acid, you get a calcium acetate, which is the final form, which is what liquid soluble or yeah, soluble calcium is. So, and that does have a period of time where it can break down, but if you feed it before you absolutely need it or make it part of your regimen, you can put a decent source of pure calcium that will break down fairly quickly and become available. And in dilution, the particulates are small enough for foliar will even have an effect through veg and maybe the first couple weeks in flower. So you can get a jump on it that way naturally too. But yeah,
I just wanted to,
you're
I
absolutely
wanted
right.
to, I wanted to throw that out there that it's
Yeah,
like
no,
people are half right when they're like it needs more CalMag. It probably does need more calcium. It just doesn't need magnesium and nitrogen along with the
and
excess
I'll say this
calcium.
as a fertilizer manufacturer, you know why you don't see specialized calcium acetate and
Huh.
stuff like that for plants very often? Because there's no profit in it. As somebody, how many times do you get somebody who works for a fertilizer manufacturer and will tell you a nugget of truth like that?
How
So
can there
there
be
you
no
go.
profit in selling a product that's 90% or 99% water?
It's a commodity. Well, it's like calcium carbonate is a commodity, and so the business case for it, like moving it around, freight and everything, and so it's that whole situation. But that's a primary reason. But it's one of the water soluble calcium. If you're gonna do something from K&F in your grow, that's a good one to do. Super simple, fun to do with the kids. Teach them about it, how to use
Do
it.
you want to give us instructions on how to do it?
We could absolutely do a water soluble calcium live sometime. No worries at all.
Okay.
It
Well,
would be lovely because
let's
I
do
think that
that.
people a lot of times don't have enough calcium in their mix, and
Yes,
then they try
Daniel.
to add more and they
You
create
wanna
problems,
directly apply it. 100%. You're correct.
you know? So,
Yep.
Well,
So yeah, we
not
could do that someday. That'd be fun.
not so
What
well. I definitely want you to join us as a guest again, buddy. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed having you.
Yeah,
So
appreciate it. No, I've really
a little
enjoyed
bit different than the duck races and the Smash Brothers on Mr. Spliff's show.
it.
Everybody
ask
should go check out Mr.
ask
Spliff.
another question, Gabby.
Yeah.
I have some questions, but now all of a sudden I'm on the spot and I just took a dab. But no. Um, so there's somebody, I'm forgetting his name. Maybe I shouldn't mention the Soil King.
Okay.
And he made a video and I saw like a clip of it. And he said that, he likes organic gardening and he likes, bugs in his soil and bugs on the plants. And he
Yeah.
made this comment and he said, did you see it, Ryan?
Oh no, I said, but
Oh.
yeah, I see what you're
He
saying.
said if bugs aren't chewing on his plants, he's not happy. And so my concern about these, I forget what it's called again, the the organic gardens and beds, living soil,
Yeah.
right? And they say, well, it gets better every crop. One problem that I have is particularly indoors, right? Like when you're outside in a greenhouse, you already know being, 100% sterile isn't going to happen, right?
Right.
But inside, I want to be very clean. And for me, the idea, and so I mentioned perpetual. This is the same reason why I don't like perpetual gardens, is because you can never clean them. And so I wish Tattoo Sadhu was here, but this is a question I've been wanting to ask the entire show was, what do people think about these gardens that you never clean them? Somebody wrote "Go Bugs."
Well, I do think that I'll say this one thing and then I'll shut up. I do think that a small amount of pest pressure could be one of those little stressors, like I was saying before, that could lead to more terpene production or more THC production to protect itself against it. Obviously, too much is very much not good, but I mean, bugs are a part of the natural life cycle. I almost think sometimes when we defoliate or whatever to the plant, it's more like a deer or some rabbits found the patch and started eating it, and it panics and it creates new growth. As you pick off certain leaves and stuff like that, it stresses it out and it wants to make more solar panels. But
the problem with pest pressure is it's persistent.
yeah, and it gets out of
It's
control,
not
and
just
then you
like a
can
In
one
a
quickly.
time.
controlled environment, I mean, bugs aren't ideal. I mean, anything, even down to the more harmless ones, even fungus gnats can get so bad they'll carry your dog away almost.
And the larva will screw up your roots.
They're just a pain in the ass. So I mean, I would say in an indoor setting, I prefer to keep it pretty much bug free unless I'm using a predatory insect. Outdoors, I like to have the idea that you know you're not going to have a sterile system outdoors, right? I think with outdoors, I like to use different products that are quote unquote I think safer, just to suffocate any bugs that are crawling on the plants, whether it be some kind of neem based or an essential oil based product to keep it to a dull roar so I can still get a desired result. But I don't have any pretension or desire to try to just sterilize and nuke a system outdoor. You're just going to create harder to kill bugs.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my biggest objections to this raised bed gardening, whether they call it living soil, or my other favorite for indoors is when they say no till. Yeah, my garden's no
No
till
shit, you're
too. I
not
just throw it
tilling
away every time.
if you bring a tractor in your living room trying to till your soil in the grow area, you're gonna bring attention to yourself.
Man, one thing that whenever I hear that in cannabis, no-till has a very specific meaning for the most part.
Right.
But I would say that in normal ag, probably 70 or 80% of no-till is non-organic. They're not tilling because they don't want to create erosion or, you know, anything or soil
Right.
loss. And a lot of times what conventional no-till does is they use herbicides to replace tilling, right? And so they're like protecting the soil, but they might be spraying Roundup or something like that, like
Yeah.
on the field in order to kill the weeds, you know, and all that. I think for cannabis, the no-till idea is like they think that I'm not trying to be rude, but they think that like if you disturb the soil, there's various levels and gradients of the soil food web going on and fungal and bacterial interactions, and you disturbing that isn't great. So it's best to just like leave it alone. And that's sort of like the cannabis indoor no-till, where
Yeah.
you're just not disturbing it. You're letting things fall on the surface. You're letting them break down and
Right.
decompose, but you're not really.
And this goes back to what we talked to earlier about, some organic methods, just the process of having it outdoors with just massive pushing forces like, the sun, the wind, water moving across the soil at such a range. I mean, that's what allows those things to work. When you bring that indoors and you kind of have your own like little micro fiefdom of biology, I mean, it makes it harder.
A
Definitely.
lot
You just don't get the full effect.
lot of advertising and marketing goes into selling 98% of this crap that's out there. Is what I've realized. It's all the same, just marketing, different
Oh yeah.
bag, different
Well,
shit.
You
and
got to
part of
hook
the
the
mark
customer, you know?
part of any marketing is making you feel like you're making the more sustainable, the healthier, the nicer, and
Oh
then the
yeah.
better choice. Like it's giving that good feeling inside that you are making a higher ethical, moral, you're taking a stand. And that's part of like they're trying to elicit that feeling so that you spend money,
Hey,
you
we
know?
all we all drive cars to go
Yeah,
pick this
sure.
stuff up, and we all burn gas. So it's like no matter what you're doing, I just always go back to, hey, we're all driving cars, so everybody does what they can, but at the same time, a lot of people don't really consider all of the things that go into being sustainable, like you guys mentioned before. And I mean, I used to grow that sour back in the day with liquid karma, bat guano in the soil, and some worm castings with Botanicare Bloom. Boom. That was like the recipe.
I guess I should say, I don't know if this is in closing or whatever, but I guess I should say that like if I meet you and I think you have great weed, I'm interested in how you got there.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I'm willing to listen to your process and what you did and what you used and what you think is important, because at the end of the day, you put great weed in a jar,
Sure.
and I
Somebody asked
like
a
that. That's what I'm
specific
into.
question I want to get in just a minute. I'm sorry. I just want
Sure.
to make a note that I want to get to it when you're done.
Then get to it right now. Go for it.
Okay. So he asked a very particular question about something called wolastanite. Wolastanite is what's called an aluminocarbon silicate, and it is a deposit, and it can also have trace minerals within its calcium silicate matrix, and it can trap different ones. If you use a wolastanite or something akin to azomite, which is they're kind of the same family, the origin is important, and you should look at the lab analysis before you use that particular one, because they can differ very heavily, even in close location to each other. Sorry, there was just a very nuanced question that it might be hard to get an answer to otherwise. So that's it.
Well, if we're going to
Yeah.
do something very nuanced like that, if you use vermiculite, make sure you wet it down because it's got naturally occurring asbestos in it, and you probably don't want to breathe that. So you probably want to get it nice and moist so that you don't have any dust flinging around. Because just because something is organic or something is a good input doesn't mean it doesn't have dangers. Like I said about the guanos, if you're mixing poop of any kind, wear a mask.
You should definitely wear a mask with pearl if you're mixing large amounts of perlite or vermiculite. Just those silicate and mineral compounds can form like just colloidal particles in the air, and it is not good. It get caught in your mucous membrane, and it can really irritate you. You might even the danger of it is that people can have um, oh My apologies. I was talking. Maybe I was misunderstood, Kiss. Then my bad on that. But I was thinking that it's a calcium silicate matrix. It would have some of the same kind of things where it entraps certain minerals within it, and you should just look at this. You should look at a lab test and see what's in that particular product before you use it. Was all as I was saying. But
Something that I wanted to ask you about, Ryan, and I've talked to you about it a little bit, but I think it's something that a lot of people may not know about. And so I'm going to quickly mention your brand, and then we're not going to do it again because I have to
oh
edit
no,
it out.
it's okay.
Well, I have to edit it out for Reddit because then they'll
Oh
just
okay.
pull it off. But you make a product called Mineralize, and it's a seawater extract. And so
Yeah. So
that's the seed product that you sell. And the reason
yeah.
why it's interesting to me is because I've used these types of products before, not on cannabis.
Mm,
Okay, because to be honest with you, um, it was too expensive at the time, and like, but what I did use it on was microgreens.
yeah.
Okay, and when we used it on the microgreens, you could tell that it was having an impact and that the plants were healthier, and then you're getting, more flavor off of it. So um, tell us about sea minerals and why someone would use sea minerals
Oh
and
man, this is a very dangerous nutshell. I will. I'm going to try my hardest to contain my enthusiasm
to
into a
not to
very
not
small
take it an hour
nutshell.
talking about it. I mean, yeah,
So
just like in a
yeah, no, I'm happy to. So the
abbreviated version because
yeah,
I think it might be something that Dave's interested in. I'm interested in. I asked you to get me a sample so I could try some.
Did
yeah,
you say seawater, like sea, as in like ocean?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So very briefly, we'll put this all in a nutshell. Just text me your address, Gabby. We'll get you. So mineralize is based on the original research by Dr. Maynard Murray, who, as a medical doctor, came up with a theory that the vast difference of cancer rates in terrestrial mammals versus ocean going mammals largely being absent of cancer, he came to the conclusion that it was because of the constant source of inorganic trace minerals in the ocean water in proportion to each other, which is very important, with the combination of organic sources laden in trace minerals in the form of algae, krill, kelp, and fish. And that combined exposure is what resulted in this lack of cancer in the ocean. And he, along with a gentleman named Mr. Don Jansen, who I spoke with years ago. I'm not sure if he's still with us. He had a farm in Nebraska back in, I think, the 60s or 70s. He inherited a bison farm. And the first time they brought material to prove this whole thing, they filled a tanker car up, rail car, with ocean water, or a few of them. And one of them malfunctioned and spilled ocean water down a hill. Well, bison are kind of like cantankerous animals. They kind of like to be on their own, unless you're a Yellowstone tourist and you try to go touch the bison. Not good, don't recommend. But the grass that grew back on the hill where that ocean water spilled on, those bison didn't give a shit if World War III was being fought on the road. They were there to eat that grass. That's all they wanted to be. And I had the luxury of talking to Mr. Jansen himself, who owned the damn bison. So it was a really cool account. And from there, they developed ocean solids, so dehydrating large amounts of ocean water at very specific sources under very specific conditions to minimize the like heavy metal contaminants and to get something in proportion of the minerals that are in proportion suitable for agriculture. So they took this solution and they grew grain, they grew foods, and it was really cool because they fed like generations of pigs the grain grown with the ocean versus like Purina pig chow basically for control. And they eliminated runts from litters. They increased joint density in chickens. They equalized egg sizes. It was really amazing research, and he even opened a hydroponics farm in Florida doing this. And and so, unfortunately, he was about to publish a second book, and he died suddenly. I don't some kind of health issue, and so the continuation of that research was largely lost. And it went on to be championed by a gentleman named Dr. Payne, who ran C90, and I met with him. He lived next to me in Georgia, And I remember I went over to his house to buy the books from him because I got interested in this, and he's like, "You want some tomatoes?" And I'm like, "I don't like raw tomatoes. You know, my neighbors bring me damn tomatoes. I'm like I've got tomatoes out my ear. You know, we've got like 50 quarts of spaghetti sauce. You know." And he's like, "You've never had a tomato?" And I'm like, "Pretty sure I have. I live in West Georgia. I've had tomatoes." And he's like, "No, you haven't. Just try this." And I was like, "Oh, it's because of the ocean, right? Because this is what I'm here for." He hands me this bucket of tomatoes. I ate the bucket. It did not make it home. There was flavors I hadn't tasted before, and I don't even like figs very much. And he gave me a bag of figs for my dad, and I ate half the bag of figs before I got home. Just as a rule, do not eat a bucket of tomatoes and half a bag of figs. Results are not recommended. It was I was speeding home. I can tell you that much. It was about to be bad news, but um, that's when I clicked. Like these trace mineral things are important, but utilizing them properly was the hard part. So with Mineralize, I talked with everybody who had something to do with it. Every professor who did a university study, people who worked at the hydroponics farm, Mr. Jansen, if he's still with us, he disappeared. He was in his 80s years ago. So I don't know if he's still with us, but I talked with everyone, and I started formulating a product or I got some hints from people who are close to Dr. Murray on how to do this properly, and because some of the sources aren't suitable anymore. And after 11 years, I came up with Mineralize. It's a very repeatably, the results are repeatable. It's very stable. Like 1 mil per gallon is like 115 ppm of actual solution. 40% of that sodium, sodium carrier that washes out. And we've done tissue testing, we've done testing with tomatoes. We've seen a tomato, say like your grocery store tomato will be like 17 on average elements in testable, meaningful concentration. Organic compost grown tomato, somewhere around like 38. It's really good tomato, kind of, similar to what your grandparents may have tasted. And then with the mineralized at concentration, 57 elements locked up in organic form. And this mineral density is what soil used to bring. Because as the continents rose out of the ocean, the soil chemistry was so much more diverse than it is now. So over time, more mobile elements kind of skedaddled through, just through weathering. That's why we don't see things of salt around, because sodium chloride is extremely soluble. It's gone, and along with others. And so when you bring this back, we found that these plants have mechanisms to wrap up these elements, heavy metals included at times, and if it's proportioned correctly or mixed correctly, you don't get the negative effects. And it creates just beautiful mineral dense food. It's very similar to C90. C90, like I said, Dr. Payne started, but Mineralize is kind of a liquid continuation because with the granular, you just can't equalize the application. But someone said about Celtic salt. So Celtic salt is sort of around the same idea, but just geologically the location isn't as ideal because you don't get as many volcanic vents. So that's real important when you make a mineral solution, is that your water has to be able to make the product, and it has to be of quality, not only by lack of pollution, but mineral density. So, but yeah, that's as short as I could put Mineralize in the
Okay, so
history of ocean-based
now I'm gonna ask
agriculture
you
into
some
a
more
nut.
questions about it. So
Yeah.
I'm poking the ocean mineral guy because I tell you to talk quickly and then I have questions. But so how does it differ from instance, like volcanic rock flour, which, I want to say I had a very before you answer, I had a very similar experience to what you said about the never having had a tomato before, when I went to Bob Kennard's farm.
Oh yeah.
Are you familiar with who he is?
A little.
Bob
Yes.
Kennard?
Yep.
Okay. So he was an organic gardening teacher here at the junior college in Santa Rosa. And he was the one that basically like put it in my head that, everyone's growing in way too much compost and that plants grow on minerals. And that, we would bring our vegetables into his class, and his class was actually at his farm. And he'd be like, "Oh, you grew this in compost." And he's like, we'd be like, how'd you know? And he's like, well, because it's a watery tomato that has no flavor, And at first, your feelings could be a little hurt because you're so proud of your
Right.
tomatoes that you grew in your backyard. But then we would walk into his field and you could eat anything off of any plant
Yeah.
and you felt like you were in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah,
And you
the
couldn't, and you
flavor.
could, and you're
Yeah.
sitting there and
You
you
felt
will,
that primal urge like an animal that selects like which grass to eat. You were like, I'm eating that. Like
it
your
was in this,
body like hits the lever like the Disney movie with like all the emotions inside your head. Whoever controls hunger is like, hey asshole, that food right there, eat it.
I don't remember like what vegetable it was, but he used to say like, oh, people don't like, and I'm gonna say Brussels sprouts, but I don't know if it was Brussels sprouts. He used to say people don't like Brussels sprouts because they've never eaten a healthy Brussels sprout.
Yep. And it's
And
like
like
that with a
when you
lot of
eat
them.
the food and it's like has all the nutrition that it needs, it's gonna taste different.
Yep.
And what he did there was, and he would buy a piece of property that he could see in potential with, but that has been really abused. Like he would always look for like a property that was a good deal, but he'd want the property to like be next to a hillside, okay, with a place where a creek runs for part of the year, or he'd know what to look for, and then he would plant 2 plants for nature for every plant that he planted for himself.
Yep. Okay,
And
that's
then
cool.
the only thing that he would add would be a tiny little bit of compost. I mean, like what people put in one hole, he probably would put on an acre, you
Okay.
know?
Yep.
And so that, and the only thing that he would bring from outside would be the volcanic rock flour. So to get back to my question, how does like volcanic rock flour differ from the minerals that are in seawater extracts, whether
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
mineralized or
So
unsafe?
no, I'd love to tell you about. So you get some of the same results with volcanic rock flour, or like a good source of it. Um, in that it brings a lot of minerals from deep within the earth. Is that we take magma, which is basically a soup of the plates twisting around the earth's core and mantle, and so it's kind of like a soup of all these things. So when it comes out and it's expunged as lava and dries, you just get an amazing matrix of just everything. And so the difference is that you get it in more of a colloidal form, and that it's very similar to it's almost and it's actually that is similar to what azomite is that it's an aluminosilicate which was from a volcanic deposit, but it's almost like a but that's a little bit different. But just pure volcanic rock flour is you get when you grind it up, you get colloidal mineral, like you get just a large number of colloidal minerals, and they're at the point where when it's ground down and sifted, fine enough on a certain mesh, your weathering processes or bacterial processes can work on it in time for you to see the difference. Like you may like somebody talked about like green sand like takes so long.
Yeah.
Well, that stuff does not take nearly as long. So you will get some of the benefit using that. The difference I would say with it is that it's not very repeatedly dosable to get the same effect with the same makeup. And with mineralized, that's really what I spent years of effort on, was figuring out how to make it repeatedly dosable. So like 1 mil always equals like 115, 120 ppm, always.
Right.
And so mineralized, the difference is that the variety of minerals is nearly the same every time. And I do that by starting with a big enough source in my basically secret mixing procedure I'm not willing to give away. But when you start with a large amount of source material with the right mixing method, you basically mix each individual mineral to its maximum proportion to the other minerals in solution, and it gets to the point where it creates a precipitate. And when it starts to create the precipitate, it's done. And at that point, the lab tests are always the same. And so that's when I got it to that point, I felt I'm able to take this as a product now because I can, in good faith, I can say, this is the same. 1 mil equals this. These are going to be your levels. Your plants will pass lab testing, and so forth. But that's how it came to be.
That's cool.
But
Is
and it's so ocean agriculture has just always been like my passion. Ever since I read that book, I found out about it. I talked with all the people who were still alive that had something to do with it, and yeah, and the Golden Coasting's talking about like the volcanic releases different minerals, right? And that's correct. So that's you'll get some variety in the different sources. But that's mineralized in a nutshell, and I appreciate you letting me talk about
That's
it.
sweet.
well, I mean,
One thing
go
one
ahead,
thing I
Ken.
thought I should say is that for anybody listening, don't get intimidated because there's lots of levels to this stuff, but growing quality cannabis for yourself isn't really all that hard if you just obey certain things. And there's so many products and there's so much stuff that didn't exist before that helps you along that path, that like obviously there's rabbit holes that we can go in that are really deep. And like what he was just talking about could be like the next level, you know? The reason I brought up green sand was because we used to like in the old school like 90s soil mixes that my friends taught me. That was a
It was in
critical
there into
component.
the 2000s. I
It
had
was
people
in
come to
there,
the
and then we
store
didn't
and buy it.
realize that it took several years to break down and become available. And so you had people growing like an organ or whatever in the like indoor runs in their pots, thinking that the green sand was doing something.
Yeah.
You
So,
know,
and the other, oh man, I almost lost. I was going to say something else. Somebody had asked a question. Where'd it go? Uh, somebody,
That's
I've been using. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Don. We got a few mineralized fans in here, but and that's the thing. And Murray touched on. It's really a shame. He had a second book coming out, which was when I was talking to Mr. Jansen, had refined
what
the
was his name
ideas.
again?
Dr. Murray. His book is called Sea Energy Agriculture.
Yeah, I've heard of him before.
And
I might have had the book.
but the it's a pretty cool little book. And I spent 11 years like making this product and testing it and lab testing it and doing side by sides. Like it's really cool when you would do like some of the heirloom vegetables. So we go back to the nutritional requirements of like some of these older cannabis strains. We were actually able to jack mineralize up to like a high ppm and run it with Chilean nitrate as the end source, and we were able to grow some of these old like heirloom tomatoes purely on the mix, and some of these others, and they were just had like wild, vibrant colors and like really cool leaf sets, and so it was fun. It's been a lot of fun, and it's my pet project. It's what got me into this industry. Like
oh, that's cool.
I got into it. I started learning to it, and I'm like, I switched my major from computer engineering to environmental science, and I got a job at Flora Hydroponics in Atlanta years ago. And I'm like, this is what I'm doing, and I've done it since.
All
But
right,
it's the whole source of my passion.
I, I'm gonna read this comment,
Yeah.
and then it's funny because Kiss responded. It is on my Instagram, right? Somebody
Uh,
wrote, "This is really dumb. We really need to know which is better, flour, uh, flour. Which flour is better smoke, Eagle 20 or Predator insects for pesticide use? Personally, I love to grow and smoke with Eagle 20.
well, the predators, they give you that nice little pop in the flower. It's kind of like
Yeah,
like pop rocks.
particularly, oh, dude, the worst smell is burning ladybugs, like when they
I mean,
fly into the
yeah,
light. But
I
wait,
am.
but then I want to say something. Kiss responds, please don't use Eagle 20.
No, I
and,
mean,
and then he goes,
there's
he goes
no,
like, I think the guy was kidding. I think he was
there's
Yeah,
just
no,
joking.
he was kidding. I'm sure it was facetious.
yeah. I mean, I will say that and this might also get me in trouble or whatever, but like, there in certain small instances, like, there's all kinds of things that have been created for fungicides, for pesticides, for what have you. Most of them were developed for food, not for things that are going to be combusted.
100%.
And
Yep.
so you have to take that into account, that like there could be certain things that like don't digest well, but they combust fine, or vice versa. And it makes it difficult for cannabis because the vast majority of stuff on the market was designed for edible crops,
Yeah.
not for combustible crops.
100%. And I think that's definitely something that, and I always tell people. Also, I use that same kind of thing to line of thought when people ask me about new products. I said, if it's a revolutionary product for cannabis, it would be a revolutionary product for growing anything undercover. So your first step should be asking why it isn't used everywhere. Why?
And
I love TNG.
we learn every 10 or 20 years. We might make something that we think is incredible. At one point, the agricultural industry thought DDT and certain other chemicals were amazing. And then we learned that they had some significant downsides and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff keeps happening. Sometimes you make something is created and you think, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and later on it's not, or vice versa, where you think it's horrible and then later on you're like, man, this is actually not as bad as I thought.
Mhm.
And cannabis is way behind other agricultural crops because you
So
weren't allowed to study it for a long time unless you were looking for harm.
it's so far behind. Like, I don't know if a lot of people who are outside the agricultural industry realize just the lack of real, just, I would say, it's starting now, but I would say readily available peer like review assistance. Like, the lack of that, like, as is really holding cannabis back from its full potential. When it decriminalizes, that first 5 to 10 years, you're going to see we're going to see some real interesting understandings of cannabis, of intricate mechanisms that we weren't able to study before. So
Because yeah, that same thing, like, people should know that for decades farmers worked very closely with, say, like UC Davis or the University of Iowa, or worked hand in hand with a combination of universities and government and farming to push stuff forward. And so we got stuck because of illegality and sort of like observational science for a really
yeah,
long time, which has value.
it
you
does.
know it
It's
has
kind of
value.
it's kind of like why moon planning by moon cycles was accurate back in the day. We didn't know the reason why, but quite why these things lined up with plant cycles and seasons and atmospheric conditions. But we know if we did it this way, we would get this result, or the harvest would be safe. And a lot of it's the same thing with cannabis.
I should say one thing too is that I think that since cannabis has gone recreational, I think people have been able to figure out how to get bigger and bigger yields that would have been considered crazy 20 years
Oh,
ago.
100%. People are
Insane,
pushing 3 pounds,
insane
like pounds
weights.
under lights.
But I
But
think, like, the final frontier is really figuring out how to manipulate growing, like, what are the triggers that creates better quality cannabis for consumption.
yes, you're going to have we've talked about this on Mr. Spliff's Lives, and people get going on me because they think I'm for this. I'm not. But what you're going to see is you're going to see the same application of GMO science to cannabis immediately. You're going to have field cultivated cannabis that doesn't pollinate, that can be grown by the acre, just an incredible density. You're going to see different stimulants. You're going to find different triggers and stimulants where they're going to grow a product that is meant for extraction that will not be even hard. Flower will be the biomass byproduct, really. It'll be grown for oil on scale. I think we'll be able to grow versions of cannabis that have. We'll be able to grow certain terpene cocktails, or just volatile organic compound cocktails that'll be very effective for treating a number of diseases. I think there will be a lot of an extreme amount of interest in the different strains that have like the mythos about them, like, hey, this is great for nerve pain, this is good for migraines, this is good for my spinal pain. I think you'll see a lot of that come together. I think there will be true pharmaceutical products that will come out of it.
And we're in the infancy of all that.
Yes, there's going to be a whole edge to minerals to pharmaceutical science that will come because of cannabis. Once it can be openly peer reviewed, research published, and it be able to be openly done all across everywhere, you're going to see a lot of things come from it. And as a scientist, it's really exciting for me to see those possibilities because we're already starting to see it a little bit. We have some interstate commerce, we have exports to like Australia, from Canada. Like some of the British Commonwealth states can send some stuff around. So we're starting to see some studies like pop up in Israel about different things. It's there's a lot of stuff that's already starting to happen, and it's just going to get much more involved as time goes on. So it'll be cannabis is nowhere near done blessing humanity, and it's going to be really interesting to see the full breadth of what it will give. And I hope I'm here to see it.
I hope you are too.
Gabby, I'm gonna have to leave in a moment.
Yeah, I kind of do too. It's 3 hours and 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
This was a good talk. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
We have 273 people that are still glued to their seats listening to us. And we had over 300, like we almost were reaching 350 people watching at one point. I'm completely grateful for you guys, both Notsodog and Ryan, for helping do this today.
I really
And
enjoyed
for all
this
those
one a
people.
whole lot, actually.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I
you know what?
did.
You hadn't done it in a while, so you missed it.
No, but
So, I'm glad your mom's okay.
yeah, well, you know.
Yeah, man. We'll be praying for your mother, and I truly hope she keeps getting better. And I know that's a heavy burden going in the holidays, so I just pray that you
It
get
wasn't
some.
conveniently timed by any means, but whatever it is, life is what it is. You handle it, you know, and so on. So, but I like talking cannabis, so it's this was a good afternoon.
Okay, since we're here at the end of the show, why don't you tell everyone where they can reach you, Ryan?
Yeah, so you can reach me. You go to mineralize.net. It's mineralize my plants on Instagram. And if anyone's interested, I'd love to talk to you about mineralize or plant health in general. And but yeah, mineralize my plants on Instagram or Ryan at mineralize.net. And always happy to take emails and chat plants anytime I get a chance to.
Yeah, you do the live stream with Mr. Spliff like almost every night.
Yeah, if you want to check out Mr. Spliff of Cannabis, I help out there, and we have lots of cool cuts available, and we show people a lot of plants and like training techniques and just all sorts of fun stuff. So, if you ever want to stop by, Mr. Spliff of Cannabis on YouTube, we do a lot of Q&A sessions. Not quite this long, but they've reached up there. But I've sincerely enjoyed tonight.
The Q&A sessions don't go long, but the live streams go for hours. Like
Yeah, they get going.
I looked, and it said it was like 12 hours long.
The Q&A sessions come in bursts, but it's
we really got to get well. So something that we've talked about already, but me and Notsodog are going to do a podcast with Mr. Spliff.
That'll be fun.
That way,
he's got an amazing breadth of like stories and experience of the industry. I mean, he was around, Subcool and so many other personalities. He's just known so many people. He's just always fun to talk to.
Yeah. And so if you want to support Notsodog and I, go to my website, GabySI.com, and I got a few of Notsodog's cuts on there. So, and I'm on Instagram at Craft Growers Network. They took away my other accounts. I should say again, I've really been enjoying Reddit. I mean, I think I'm enjoying it because maybe I haven't gotten sick of it yet.
Reddit's good when people like contribute on your subs, like your subreddits for sure.
Well, you know what happened? The video that me and Brandon did last week, like the part 1 of this, got 30,000 views in 24 hours.
Wow.
And I haven't had any other media get that type of views in total, period. So when a video gets 30,000 views in 24 hours, I was like, holy shit. And and also I think after I did a little video showing some tissue culture stuff, and it got 75,000 views in like a week.
That's wild.
Oh wow. There you go.
I need to pick up my middle child from high school.
Go ahead.
I love you all. It was
Anyway.
a wonderful chat. It was great to meet you, Ryan, and chat today.
Buddy.
It was really good.
Yeah, thank you.
And you guys have a lovely day.
Make sure you leave it let it download.
Leave it open. I will.
Okay. So what I wanted to finish saying before I hang up is that I'm on Reddit, Gaby Staten Island. We have the Craft Growers Network. We have Your Weed Stories on Reddit. Overgrow. I'm on Overgrow as well. And yeah, they made like a group for Gaby Staten Island Genetics. Somebody made it for me, and then they invited me in. And so Reddit and Overgrow, and not so much Discord, but like I'm trying to stay away from the Zuck, trying to do as little on the Zuck's
Yeah.
platforms as possible. And to be honest with you, I've posted a ton of stuff on X, and I
Yeah.
don't get any traction at all.
X is
I'm not,
very bizarre, and it's either on or just completely off.
yeah,
Like I've
some
had
people
the
do good on
same.
X, but Silent Truth says Reddit is pretty wild if you're into swinging. I'm into hustling.
Hey, Urban,
No,
how you
and
doing, buddy?
like I said, we made these shows where we're just trying to educate people, and that was the purpose today, you know. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll be doing one same time next week.
Yeah. John, somebody up there was saying he wants part 3, so if you want to do it, just let me know, and we'll definitely clear out some time,
So
and I'd be happy to do this.
I want to say one thing before we go.
Yeah.
And I want to see if I can find it, because someone talked some shit, and I don't even know why I'm gonna address this, but they said something like, I hate this topic, and you guys are just doing this like to publicize yourself. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
So I have
Like,
a rebuttal to that because I deal with that. You know, I think it's important that we have competent people who specialize on either side of the fence come together and show the commonalities of what we see in both the problems and the good things that we all see in organic and inorganic growing. I think having these sorts of open forums with specialists who are on either side, it helps both sides grow to what is ultimately, I think, a higher expression of agriculture, both for the results and for our own responsibility to our planet. So only good things can happen about talking about opposite sides of the fence in a civil and educated manner. And that's what we did here tonight. We had good people, we had good questions, there wasn't animosity. And I think everyone walked away with, something that they might want to try or something they didn't know. And, when you bring all this entropy together and all in a good spirit, you get good things.
what's
So,
really funny, I have to, so I'm gonna read to you what he said, and then we'll move on.
yep.
But he said, sort of hate this topic to begin with. Why exactly are you doing this? Just to try to market yourselves? And it's like, no, because we like talking about growing weed, and
Yeah.
like when we have Tatu Sadhu, who's a specialist in organics, and then we have
Yep.
Ryan, who's a specialist in hydroponic nutrients. Like, this is to me an obvious thing that we do, and from the fact that we had 350 people watching, like for 3 hours plus, and we still have over 200 people watching. Um, I'm just grateful.
Yeah, no,
So
I really enjoyed the talk tonight. I enjoyed the time spent and appreciate you asking me to come by. And I had a lot of good
last minute, I
questions.
sent you a message last night. You were already sleeping.
Yeah, dude, there was a point where I just checked out last night. I was done for the day.
Well, I wanted to say something else, and then I forgot when I said what that guy posted. Ugh.
We got somebody here asking you, Gabby, how can someone discreetly not online get your genetics?
Not online?
Yeah.
You can come and see me. That would be pretty discreet. We can meet in a clandestine location, wearing like hooded up and stuff like that. So, if you go to my website, there's a message, like a little envelope where you can send me a message. It's not an email, it's just like a text message on my site. And
Yeah.
then we can exchange phone numbers and we can talk. So, yeah. Oh, so what I wanted to say, I remembered now. Holy shit. Brandon he like teased himself up to get so much hate. Like, because so last
He was
week,
good. I don't know why people be hating on him. It was good talking with him tonight.
well, no, the reason why people hate on him is because he doesn't toe the organic line hard.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
gotcha.
Like, he's scientific about it, and he loves to grow organic. That's how he grows himself. But last week I asked him a question. I said, do you, and I made a short of it, it's on Instagram. I said, do you think if a product is grown organic, it automatically means it's better? And he said, no, of course not. He said, and sometimes organics have heavy metals and it's not always cleaner. And so my AI program that edits this made a short out of it. And holy shit, bro. Like, it was like a 1 minute clip, got like 30,000 views on Instagram, which isn't common. Like, it was a definite.
People latched onto that one, huh?
Oh, like it was a hot button topic. And he was like, man, did we rage bait people? And I was like, I wasn't trying to. And at the end, he even says, I grow organic. But the thing is like, he'll say he grows organic, but that sometimes there might be a situation where he tells someone that they should use some minerals, that they should use some salts. Like, because in the end, what he wants is people to just grow the best possible flour. That's what he wants. And he's a super kind bro. Yeah, I'm sad that he had to leave early because I wanted to ask him questions about
his phone, his internet was just not having it with him today for some reason. He started
out
out
fine,
and then it
when
went
you live
downhill.
in his type of paradise.
It was starting out just fine, but then it got worse and worse.
Yeah, maybe there was a storm coming in or something.
Yeah, maybe
the satellite wasn't in exactly the right spot. I don't know how that shit works, but yeah, I'm grateful for you, Ryan. Me and Ryan have known each other. Must be like 25. Must be at least 25 years.
A long time. So, yeah. I remember. Yeah, because you at the time, I think you were. Was it with Nanolux or Sun Distribution? I think like Emily was working with you or something at the time.
No, Emily was working for me as a salesperson for my company, which was Everest Garden Supply at the time. Yeah. We sold grow tents and
and I remember you from back there in your store, and we were friends on Facebook for years and years until they nuked your account. So. Yeah, because when you came into live, I'm like, I know who this gentleman is.
The funny thing is, I couldn't tell who you were because you were like in such a dark room, like you were trying to be discreet or something. Luckily, like, it's funny. There's like people that go on these podcasts like this.
Oh yeah.
Like they don't want to. It's like, bro, if you have to do that, just shut the camera off. Like, you can just do it like this. I just think it's weird when they come like with a ski mask on or something like that.
Oh, Dave, Gaby wasn't my babysitter, but so I've been in my current capacity for Psycho and I rolled out Psycho in the United States.
I knew you from Psycho.
Yeah, I was
and also
Psycho.
From Emily.
Thank you, Shaggy. I am now in my 20s again. Thank you so much. You made me feel so much better. But I mean, I've been in this kind of current capacity for about 10 years even. Between, or actually, no, probably about 11 or 12 with Psycho and Aptus. And then before that, I ran stores in Cleveland and worked at stores in Atlanta was my first job in the industry. So, yeah, all in all, and I was friends with Gaby earlier because I think it was like a Facebook group or something we were talking back then, and he had sent a friend request and we kept in touch. But, yeah, it's been probably at least like 15 years.
We would still be friends on Facebook, but they took my shit away.
Yeah, that they took. Probably about 15 years.
So, well, anyway, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I think you did a great job. I'm sure everyone will agree that we should definitely have Ryan come back. And then, if you didn't get enough of Ryan for today, he'll be on Mr. Spliff show tonight, where I'm donating in Chem 91. He does all these games over there, and I just keep on throwing clones into
the mix. We appreciate your support, and
I love the guy, and he's given me some awesome shit too. He gave me the UK cheese and the cherry pie, and it's just like, and we have great conversations, and one thing I'll say, and I think it's fine to say it, is like, me and him have different political alignment.
Yeah.
Like we're
just differences, but you can still get along. That's what's great about humanity. We need to learn to get along and just be good with each other.
Yeah, and we're both reasonable. Like just because we don't like agree with each other on things, but like also we both have a tremendous love for cannabis.
Yeah.
And like
love of the plant, man.
Yeah. So I mean, I truly love the guy. Even So yeah,
Well, we
I
appreciate you,
will I
Gaby.
will come on and say hello later on
Yeah,
in a
no,
couple
we've been
minutes.
no, we put in some effort, man. It's been hours and then prep before it, so we appreciate your time and appreciate you again having me. If you
Oh
want to do
no.
a part three of this, we'll definitely come back and get some things to talk about in advance, take some questions, and
Everybody was stoked about it except for one guy. Like sent that nasty message,
one guy
you
was
know?
not happy about it.
Oh, and you know what's funny? I mean, I don't know. This could be ready? This could have been Matt Riot. Because what was funny was like he said it on one sub, but I had like shared it on another sub, and then he
Okay.
went on that other sub
Uh,
and made a comment there,
he's
and I'm
like
like,
crabgrass, man.
bro, I'm like, why are you just like, if you don't like it, don't come and join us. Don't ask a question. It's all good.
Yeah,
You don't have to, um, like you don't have to watch. So it's just like he got
that's it,
like
buddy.
he's like
We
so
got
mad that we're having this like conversation. This is annoying. It's like whatever, bro.
people have gotten so used to online about being whatever camp. It could be political, it could be about a game, it could be about a car, a favorite car, or bake, or anything. But people have gotten really just so wrapped up in flying the flag for something. It's this is a good this is a good form that we have here. We all love cannabis. We love growing it. Everyone here has a genuine interest in forwarding responsible, quality, and repeatable cultivation of the plant. And especially in times like this, that needs to keep bringing us together. And we've got people from all over the world, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, all here talking about growing flower. So y'all come back, support Gabby's podcast, and I'm sure I will see y'all around soon too.
Check out my website, gabbysi.com.
Go to Gabby's website and buy everything. Just
Everything.
add everything to cart, and just do it. You'll love life.
Alrighty. Hey Ryan, so we're gonna shut this off, but you can't leave, okay?